And April 6th is what we have.
About 2 minutes. 2 minutes. About a minute.
Roger Houston.
29th, isn't it?
Leap day.
2/29, leap day. Hey, Tom.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Sliding right in, huh?
Oh, I got a ride.
Their clock's must be wrong. He said we were getting ready to start us. Yeah.
This is the big time. This is national. It's nuts.
All right, stand by.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the joint meeting between the Long Meadow Select Board and the Long Meadow School Committee. The date is February 29, 2017. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The prime objective of tonight's meeting is to have the town manager deliver the budget to the select board and have the schools make a presentation on their budget also to the select board and now to also the community itself. Stephen's going to go first, but prior to that, I will check and see, is there any announcements by any of the members from either the select board or the school committee? Go ahead, Alan.
I have a comment.
last week there was a story in the Republican about a hateful note that was left on the windshield of Abdullah Abdul Rahim's car at the Longmeadow Shops in November. It concerns me that this incident would leave the impression that Longmeadow is insensitive or an inhospitable place for those of the Muslim faith. I'm not going to comment on the police investigation. Rather, I would like to speak to what I hope we can all find common ground on. The statements on the note on the windshield, which used profanity and told Mr. Abdul Rahim and his friend to go back to Iraq, those were hateful statements. They obviously showed disapproval of the Muslim faith, and the statements were meant to say that Mr. Abdul Rahim and his friend do not belong here. I am saying that Mr. Abdul Rahim and his friend are welcome in Longmeadow. They are welcome to dine in our restaurants. They are welcome to use our parks, to walk in our beautiful conservation areas. I don't know whether Mr. Abdul Rahim and his friend live in Longmeadow, but if they do not, they are welcome to live here and to own property here. They are welcome to move to Longmeadow and send their children to our schools if they don't already live here. The sentiments on the note left on that windshield do not represent the views of the town of Longmeadow or the vast majority of its residents. I will also say that the statements in that note, in addition to being hateful, were cowardly. To leave an anonymous note like that is what we often see on the internet, where people will make nasty comments without having the guts to show their faces to take responsibility for what they are saying. I think this needs to be said because right now we are engaged in a battle of ideas with people in this country and around the world who espouse murderous ideologies. From our earliest days, this country was a place where people having different religious faiths could get along and form community. This is not the time to divide ourselves on religious lines. And it is sadly ironic that Mr. Abdul Rahim is a person whom I know by reputation to be in the forefront of building understanding between Muslims and law enforcement in this area. The Longmeadow I know honors the work Mr. Abdul Rahim does in this area. And it so happened that last week, Critical Connections, an organization based here in Longmeadow, put on a program designed to build bridges and understanding between Muslims and non-Muslims in our area. And that program took place at First Church in Longmeadow because First Church wanted to host that kind of program. I am proud that such an organization finds its home in Longmeadow and that we are the type of community that wanted to host such an event. That is the real Longmeadow, not that ugly note that was left on Mr. Abdul Rahim's car.
Okay, thank you, Alice. Any other comments from the board?
I'd just like to follow up and say that I was also very disappointed with the actions that someone from our town took. I know we have a lot of individuals of the Muslim faith who live here, work here, go to school here, and I just hope they always feel welcome, and thank you for your comments, Alice.
Thank you.
Do we have any resident comments? No resident comments? Any select board comments? No select board comments. Okay. Purpose tonight is to listen to the school budget and to the Longmeadow town budget. Stephen, I guess you're the first one up, so why don't you go ahead and take, I guess, the whiteboard behind us, and if you're ready. If you're not, we'll do a soft shoot for a couple.
Should we move over?
Yeah, it's likely to be easier, Tom. You gonna be able to make it, Steve?
I'm making it just fine. It's whether or not the computer itself is going to make it. It's doing this thing where it won't flip to
No, okay, sure.
landscape. So I can do it here. It's fine.
You okay there?
I'm okay. It looks okay to me.
Okay.
That's good enough. Excuse me. Okay, I guess we'll get started now. Members of the Select Board, members of the School Committee, Superintendent Doyle, thank you for giving me the chance to present the 2017 Town Manager's Budget Recommendation. Before I begin, I would like to just make one comment, and that is that this budget was challenging. It was challenging to put together this budget and deliver a balanced budget to the Select Board that, by and large, accomplishes a base level of services, probably less than base level of services in some instances, but is balanced without the use of reserves. I want to commend Finance Director Paul Pasterzik once again for all of his work in helping produce the budget. As has been the case for many years, it simply doesn't happen without him. But I also want to extend gratitude to department heads as well as the school district for the many conversations and adjustments that were made along the way, and for the spirit of cooperation that we have throughout town government. So with that, I'll begin the presentation. Sorry. So, this is the pie chart. This is a pie chart or a theme here. Town Manager's recommendation for fiscal year 2017 by budgeted funds. And basically what that means is general funds, enterprise, not special education funds for the schools are really the big number that's excluded from this. This is basically what town meeting votes on. So you can see basically the cost allocations there. Public Works and Capital is the biggest town side number at about $10 million. Public schools, the recommendation is about $32.9 million. That's an increase over FY16 of $808,000. It is about $308,000 short of what the school committee approved. Looking at public safety, planning and community development, most of these percentages and numbers really are very, very similar to last year. So now when you look at all funds, including the special education funds for the schools, and then you look at where the money goes per operating category, obviously the vast majority of our funds go to wages. We are in the people business, so our work product is human beings, and that's why our salary and benefits really combined are our largest expenses. And then debt service is about 8% of our expenditures, which is fairly typical. And then we have what's called expenses, and those are a whole host of things, utility costs, things like that, that go on during the year. So for the general government budget, we are proposing $1.475 million. That's a $33,000 reduction from FY 2016. A big chunk of that reduction is the $40,000 in combined police and fire overtime that was submitted to the reserve fund in the FY 17 budget. We have reallocated that back to the departments. We've seen that the reduction in the line item has, we've been reporting on it all year, that the police and fire departments both really need the overtime that is budgeted, and we wanted to return that to where it's really rightfully budgeted. So that's the big reduction there, because the reserve fund is carried under the general government budget. The overtime is traditionally carried under the public safety budget. So public safety, as you can see, there's an increase of about $48,000 in the police department budget. That's $35,000 for a vehicle to be purchased, as well as the additional overtime that's put, the $20,000 that's put back in that I just mentioned. We did not purchase any vehicles last year. Had we, it would have been an even smaller increase year over year. Our vehicle replacement plan, and we'll talk about this more later, really should be updated it calls for vehicles each year, and we did not purchase a vehicle last year. So the fire department also has an increase. Again, that's the $20,000 in overtime, and then increased EMS benefit and reimbursement costs. Planning and community development, as you can see, there's a pretty small amount of money in our budget, and it's a decrease of about $5,000. Again, the schools, they'll talk more about their budget in a few minutes, so I won't dwell on that. Just the general fund budget is, the recommended increase is 2.5%. Again, that's $308,000 less than they asked for, and the big cost driver there is the full-day kindergarten. Public Works, about $3.4 million in operating budget. The capital of about $1.5 million would be on top of that, and then the enterprise funds. In addition to those figures, that gets you the $10 million that I showed in the first slide. That's an $80,000 decrease. Part of that includes reallocation of DPW employee time. We were in the third year of a 3-year plan to do that reallocation based on a study that was done at the behest of the audit committee some years ago. We are fortunate in that because of the climate in the electricity markets, or the utility markets, the utility line items have been able to be reduced because of lower gas, fuel, natural gas, and electricity costs. But there's no expanded services at all. We've discussed many ways that we could expand services over the course of the year, and we're not able to fund any of those. Community services, this is library, parks and rec, council on aging, $1.5 million. That's a almost $25,000 decrease from FY 2016. The council on aging budget is lower from the general fund. I do want to commend the staff over there. Have written a number of grants that have been successful. So the overall budget is increasing, but because of the grants, we were able to lower the contribution to the general fund. Debt service is a small decrease from FY16, and that really is a result of we had an accelerated band repayment plan where you have 5 years to repay a bond anticipation note, and we basically flattened out the repayment timeline. We were paying them in less than 5 years, but to be able to balance the budget, we had to stick to a 5-year repayment schedule. Employee benefits and liability and property insurance. This was a number we'll talk about in a little more detail in a later slide, but it's obviously a significant increase, most noticeably in health insurance premiums from Scannick Valley that have, right now we are carrying in the budget a 17% increase, which is a big number. We didn't learn of the number till last week, so that has really kind of really upturned the apple cart quite a bit, and we're waiting to see. We won't find out probably till Wednesday what the final percentage and final number is. So this number is we took what we feel could be the worst case scenario for the Scannick Valley number and carried it in our budget. And then of course there is a $60,000 increase in the Hampden County Retirement Board assessment. I will note that it was $320,000 increase last year, so that was one positive piece of news as we prepared the budget. Just to review the available fund balances, this is as of February 26th. Free cash was $500,000. Operational stabilization, $2.7. Capital stabilization, $32,000. Water retained earnings, about $200,000. Sewer retained earnings, $373,000. Solid waste recycling retained earnings, about $20,000. And then ambulance reserve fund, about $70,000. Did I skip one? Jump one, two. Okay, sorry. So, I just want to do, this is just a department summary, 16/17. As you can see in the areas of general government, planning, community development, public works, community services, the budgets have gone down from fiscal year 2016. In fact, the town departments, general fund operating budgets in the non-school category are $76,000 less than FY16. You can see the increase there for the public safety. I'll go into greater detail on that in a minute. But then the other increases in the budget are the schools and the employee benefits liability, which overall is an almost 8% increase. So it was, as we noted in the previous slide, it's about a 1.8% increase for public safety. It's a value of about $84,000. $80,000 of that is a result of three primary factors. That's the $40,000 shift of the overtime from the reserve fund back into the public safety function, and then again the $35,000 patrol vehicle that was removed from the FY16 budget, and then the third item of that is because we did not replace a vehicle last year, and we were scheduled to replace 2 vehicles this year, but because of the stresses on the budget, we could only propose replacing 1, we added $5,000 to our vehicle maintenance budget because the vehicles, a number of the patrol vehicles they have are getting high mileage and are costing more to maintain. If we did not have these 3 factors, it would be, from an operating standpoint, it would be 0.42% less than FY16. So on the budget that we had recommended for the school department, it's a 2.5% increase. Again, the value of that over FY16 is $808,000. The budget that was approved by the school committee represents a $1.1 million increase. So there's a $308,000 difference between what my recommendation is and the school committee request. And that $308,000, again, would add to that 2.52% increase. And the bottom line is that if we fully funded the school committee request, it would result in either a reduction in force, a disinvestment in important policy initiatives, or some combination of both. As I reported in my cover memo, my budget message to the select board, we were not able to recommend fully funding the 3 key policy initiatives, and that is capital funding, other post-employment benefits or OPEB funding, and not levying to the full 2.5% increase that's allowed under state law. And that's something we've talked a lot about at the select board level. We cut everywhere we reasonably thought we could to try and get there. We do not want to violate the select board policy on spending reserves on recurring operating expenses. And so we are recommending essentially for each of those 3 policies, we recommended funding 75% of what would have been the full amount had we been able to comply with the policies. But we got to the point where we were going to be cutting positions and not vacant positions that were advertised. People working for the town today were looking at losing jobs if we had gone to fully fund the initiatives with our operating revenues. So, Scandic Valley will meet Wednesday. They did announce this last week, a significant increase in one of the providers. They vote Wednesday in the final rate, and we are carrying a conservative number. And the only hope we have is that if the final vote that they increase, if the final vote has a premium increase that is less than what we're carrying, a reduction in that line item may help partially restore cuts or fund some of the initiatives. I can tell you that it'd only get you partway there on any of it. Potentially, you could see maybe 150,000, 160,000 at best as a reduction in the number, and that really wouldn't take care of fully funding the initiatives, and it would only partially restore some of the cuts that we had to make. We had, even without supplemental requests from the department heads, we reduced the requested budget from departments by almost $300,000 as we worked through it on the town side. So I ran through that kind of quickly. I'm certainly open to questions or comments about the budget, or I can go back to any particular slide if needed.
Stephen, I just have a request. There's a slide back there that says available fund balances. I would ask that if possible, you modify that or add to that slide to show the target balances that have been established by policies. So we have, here's what the balances are. Some of them I know have no policy, like the ambulance fund has no policy, but some of them do have a policy, and I think it'd be helpful for people to see how those balances relate to our policies.
I think it's safe to say most of them are on the low end of.
Well, I understand that. I'm just saying that. But as we make this visible and put this on the town website, which I'm sure we will, I would think it'd be helpful to have those targets up there.
Okay. Any other?
Dave, 2 years ago, we had budget, we were going over, it was in a notebook and it had words, what we have is kind of a spreadsheet now. I found the descriptions and because this is all to comply with the GFOA guidelines that we've agreed to do. And I think it would be tremendously helpful if we had that again this year. Because we have to produce it anyway, right, to the public. So I think it'd be very useful for those of us who have to, we're going to spend several meetings going through the budget. I think it'd be very useful for the school committee members because they're going to stay engaged in this budget process. Is that something we can do?
Yeah, we'll be Paul and I were finalizing the numbers late Friday to get you guys the budget message, which is the memo, and then the spreadsheets. His team, the finance department, has been updating the GFOA budget, but I do believe we have a draft that is suitable for circulation. If we don't have it already by the end of today, then we'll have it by our next meeting. So just understanding it's in draft format and it's a large document. It is an award-winning document, as we've discussed before. We did get recognized by the Government Finance Association for budgeting best practices because of that document. So I look forward to sharing it broadly.
Great.
Now, when you said at that last slide, you said, and we got here by going to changing the policies, and then so you went through that very quickly. So you went up to the full 2.5, and you cut the capital to 75% of the policy and OPEB to 75%?
No. Let me restate that.
Okay, I didn't quite understand.
So we didn't change the policies, but I believe all of the policies say when funding is available.
Right.
Okay, everything we do is subject to appropriation. So we had projected what the full cost of so it would be, capital this year based on the policy would be 2 3/4% of operating revenues. That's what the policy says. That's about 1.6 million. We are proposing 1.5 million for capital.
Okay.
And I don't, OPEB would have been 2 1/4%. No, 2%.
We're about to 2.5%.
2.5% for OPEB, which is 122. 122. I can't read. 122. We are proposing 91.
We're short 91.
Oh, we're short. Yeah, so short. So we basically took the target numbers based on the select board policies of what they would be based on projected FY17 operating revenues, and then took 75% of each of those numbers.
Okay.
So if you look at 1.6 million for capital as a 100% number, we funded 75%, and we did that for each. So on the levy side, if we said we only wanted to go up 2.25%, we went up slightly higher than that, but not to the full 2.5%.
Oh, you didn't?
And I think it'd be easy, it'd be very easy, really, to just say, you know what, it's tight this year. We got the kindergarten that needs to be funded, that the school committee's requested. Let's just, fully fund the initiatives. But as we discussed, actually with the department heads today, is these investments in capital and OPEB and not taxing to the full extent of the tax levy that are the wisest investments we're making in our financial future. Because in fiscal year 2022 as projected, if we can no longer levy beyond our mill rate, it is spending on capital and OPEB and other core areas that are going to be enormous budget stressors and cause very, very difficult decisions. And if we're not dealing with these in meaningful ways now, it's going to be exceptionally difficult to do that in 2022. And that's, I hopefully we've conveyed to at least the select board, I haven't talked much to the school committee directly about it, but hopefully we've conveyed to the board and the folks at home that this mill rate cap that's constitutional in the Commonwealth is a serious issue for Long Meadow, and we do believe we'll probably be one of the, if not the first, one of the first communities to hit it, and it'll be ongoing until they either change the Constitution or we figure something else out. And so it's one of those things where it'd be easy to say, let's just tax to the max this year and wait for it next year, but that's kicking the can down the road, and the road is short enough at this point where we can see the really negative consequences that will have.
One last question.
Oh, sorry.
What time on Wednesday is Scantic Valley meeting? Is that 9:30?
9:30.
So by the afternoon, we'll have an idea of where we are exactly. Thank
So when
you.
we meet again, we'll have a much better sense.
Okay.
Steve, before, I just want to follow up on Marie's question. So Stephen, for things like budget and capital and OPEB, what were they last year, and how does that compare with what you're proposing for this year? Is 75% of it seems to me that 75% of the policy is actually a lower number in at least one of those cases than last year, isn't it?
I don't know, but capital is still an increase, but it's a very small increase. And I think we are increasing capital spending, but if you look at the context of when that policy was adopted, it was adopted to really start to address many years of deferred investment in capital, which is why that automatic increase was built into the policy, because we had lost so much ground on infrastructure investment. The 0.25% increase each year was built in. And that was the discussion we had when the policy was adopted. So for us, it's not even a moral victory to say we increase capital spending, because we're still not complying with the policy. And the reason that the policy was adopted was because we had a lack of investment in our capital.
Right, I'm just trying to compare dollars to dollars in terms of, I seem to recall last year we put $100,000 into OPEB, and now you're talking about $91,500.
No, it's a $91,000 cut,
Yeah.
Mark, for what was originally, to meet your objectives, you folks had 2.5% of the tax levy. We actually cut that back to something that is less. So while we would have met last year's initiative of 2.25%, that's what it was last year, but the actual amount for the OPEB in FY16 was 237,000. We're bumping that up to 275,800.
Oh, okay.
So we couldn't meet your initiative fully, but we did meet a portion of it. We still are above last year's percentage levels, but we couldn't meet the increment that you wanted.
And policy would have been 367,300, is that
Right,
it?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's $38,500 increase, but not compliant with the policy.
I mean, we're having, I'm sure anybody listening to this is totally confused about the 70% of the policy. It would be really neat if, maybe it's on this, to summarize that, in a memo, so that we're all figuring out what it was last year, what it would be under the policy, what it is. I think I understand what you're talking about. You're really talking about 75% of the 0.25% increase for each of these three initiatives. But it would be nice to actually have those in sort of dollar terms.
If you look at and again, this is for people listening to this, and the stuff will all be posted on the website, I think, as we get through it, but if you look at the 14-page 8-point font spreadsheet that has the
Right.
information, it's all, if you have to go to the specific functions, it's in there, but the easiest way to explain it is that we funded 3/4 of what the fully funded amount would have been for the policies, for those three policies.
I think this is gonna be the focus of a lot of our discussions, and to sort of have it in one
Sure, we can spell that out a little better.
intelligible place would
Absolutely.
be great.
Mhm.
And Stephen, in terms of, I know on this one page here, you have down all the revenues, local receipts, and student department special revenues, right? So this section is all the revenues, any money the town makes, but those figures are really just integrated into each one of those pies, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, basically.
They all flow kind of together at different levels of hierarchy,
Yeah.
whether it's summary or detail.
Okay, so it does look like we made, over 4.6 million in terms of,
Local receipts.
local receipts, and then the school had 2.9 million. Right?
Correct.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, it's all in the pie is a important illustration, in that it is a fixed circle, and all the revenues that we have projected are in there. And so any addition of cost or any transference of cost changes those slices. It doesn't expand the pie. So I think that's one of the things that, as Alex noted, these are the things we have to struggle with as we get through the discussion.
Stephen, refresh my memory, did we take 35,000 out of the auto fund last year.
There was 0 vehicles funded for the police department in FY '16.
Did we remove money? I know we took the overtime, I just don't recall taking the vehicle.
The overtime was moved to a different account,
Right.
but the vehicles were removed from the budget.
Okay. You mentioned the COA and the grants. The grant money being used for soft costs?
It's really an expansion of cost share, largely in our nutrition program, things funded by Greater Springfield Social Services.
Okay.
And the grants are, we're not, I don't think we're funding salaries, at least not of our full-time positions. Potentially, people in the cooks or assistant cooks that work in the kitchen. But those grants that we get are recurring grants. We were just successful in upping the amounts that we receive every year. So they're not kind of one-shot deals where we're relying on one-time revenue to fund the operational expense.
Right. You feel fairly comfortable with soft costs of what amount of Okay.
I guess if the grants dried up, we wouldn't necessarily have to close the senior center.
Right, or find additional.
I don't know that we'd have a nutrition program, but we wouldn't,
Yeah.
so if that's what you mean.
Okay. The thing that keeps coming back and bothering me quite a bit is that, yeah, you've got partially balanced budget at this point. If it doesn't meet the request from the schools, and you submitted, I think we're still 300 and some thousand. And you had made the statement in it that you are actually making reductions in the program. The capital program is starting to be reduced, and that was sound management percentages that we set up. We are very much behind. I'd hate to under talk the importance, and I think you did good credit to that. It's a very important program, equally as important in some respects as personnel for the whole health of this community.
Mm-hmm.
The long-range health, and somebody has got to take care of that long-range health. I guess what really bothers me is you said even now you're cutting back and we're still looking for a lot of money. I don't know how we keep avoiding the discussion of an override. I don't know. You and I have chatted some about that. But based on what you're telling me, based on the charts that I'm seeing, and based on the needs of the community, and the fact that we are starting now to cut into initiatives, which is counterproductive to sound management, that we would either be looking at an override or actual reduction in services.
I think, Richard, my response to that would be the budget that I'm recommending is a base level budget. And there is some degradation of services. I mean, to some extent, we are partially offset, again, by utility costs being lower.
Right.
But we have, we really, we looked at expenditure trends in virtually every line item, and we always talk about the nickels and dimes. It's amazing. It's almost $64 million, and the amount of time we spend on $1,500 here, $2,000 there. But that's how you have to do it to get. I mean, there's 14 pages of line item, so it's
Right.
There's a lot to go through. And there are times where something may come up because you're guessing ahead what your costs are going to be. It's likely that we will get hit with an unexpected cost that we either won't have to fund or we'll have to cut something else and make a transfer to fund because we reduced the line item. And that's the challenge that we had. But I still feel like I would say that the override question would come in when you are not able to provide base level services, which I do believe we can do with this budget. But again, there's $308,000 not in this budget that I think there's some expectation that should be there, at least on the part of the school committee, based on what they passed, what they approved.
I just don't want anybody to walk away from the table thinking that you can take out the entire OPEB fund and the entire capital fund, and that it's sound management or moving forward. Well, that could destroy our credit rating if we do that kind of stuff, or we certainly start to hurt our credit rating. I mean, somebody's going to look at us like, what are you doing? It's not a sound management objective, the whole management of the entire community. And that's just my concern, is that you are actually making reductions this year. You're proposing reductions to this board. This is not a full funded budget. The policies and established policies.
The policy's certainly not. And I think the other thing, Richard, is there's one change in service level item that I can really think of concretely, and that is the police department. We are proposing not adding a position, but changing a patrol officer position into a traffic sergeant position.
Right, I saw that in your notes.
And I think that, but because of a variety of factors, the net cost of doing all of that, I think it was $3,000, or it's a pretty small amount.
Well, yeah, it wasn't big.
Yeah, it was, I don't even think it was over 5,000.
No, it wasn't. It looked like it was in.
It was a very small amount, but that is a position that really is intended to benefit the entire community, and manage our crossing guard program. We do get a lot of traffic complaints, and most of our complaints are generated, quite honestly, by school activities. It's something we spend a lot of time talking about around the schools, and we felt that based on the discussions we've had about, you know, biking to school and crossings that we feel need to be enhanced, that's a position that was really in need in the community. But that's it. I mean, we've also talked about, you know, the playing fields. We've talked about the maintenance of building. We've talked about a lot of things that we'd like to see done in a more enhanced or greater way. And there's none of that in here.
I'd like to also comment upon one of the other cuts in services to the community. That's the Bliss tennis court. You know, prior to you coming here, Stephen, that was a situation that I think got out of hand. It very, very much deteriorated. There was a lot of popular vote by, or support by a lot of people in the community to bring that back into a facility that's useful for the community. I think we've seen that it is used by the community, and I think it's a shame that the Parks Department, you know, and a facility that is a gem of the community is on the chopping block at this point, and I'm certainly going to push to see how we can not do that. I think that it would be a shame to backtrack on something, especially given the history of when we didn't have it for many years and what it took to bring it back and the popularity of bringing it back.
I agree with that. Mark actually was somewhat, I think it was the first year open when I first got here 3 years ago. And, you know, I guess, again, we got up to the point where it was either that or, and I say that, I don't want to narrow it down to one cut, but that's $15,000 for the annual maintenance. You know, that could be a part-time position that currently provides service in the town department for people who want to come into town hall or another town office and talk to someone and be served by someone in town government. And so, given the choice of the two, and in light of the fact that we have brand new asphalt tennis courts that are about to be reopened, which is one of the reasons why I think people played Bliss more heavily, was because the courts at Blinn were in pretty tough shape, that we could sustain fewer courts. And there are other options who feel strongly about the clay court experience, which I know there are many. I did hear a lot of that. And the other thing is we did get a donation to reopen the courts. The town did make a decision during one budget year to fully fund it from the town side. Perhaps we could see if there's interest in donations for that again. But it's not, it gets concrete. I mean, it gets specific in a hurry when you get down to the nitty-gritty of trying to balance the budget. And, you know, it doesn't feel, you know, nobody feels it when it's the natural gas line item, but when we cut that beyond what we think can be done responsibly, it gets into specific things like tennis courts and...
Right, but for $12,000 and the number of people who use it, and whether it's 12,000, I thought it was 11,000, whatever it is that was in the budget. I mean, I don't think anybody here believes that in September of 2017, we're not going to sit here with at least a $12,000 free cash coming through. And for that reason alone, I would say let's do something and keep that in place. I mean, it really is an impact on the entire town to do that. I mean, again, we've got plenty of opportunity to discuss it. Now, you know, today isn't the time to do that. There's some other opportunities we have as well. I mean, you know, we talked about the vehicle for the police department. I still think we need another look at vehicles and what we do for vehicles. You know, when we recently brought on a K-9 unit, we had a vehicle dedicated to a K-9 unit, which wasn't in the budget a year ago. We were going to do that, But I'll tell you, we've done it before, and I could see doing it again, is take a look somewhere in May of this year and find $35,000 and buy the vehicle this year, and then not put it in next year's budget. And we've done that in the past, and I'd certainly support doing that again if the data shows that we absolutely need a vehicle, and now's the time to do it. And we have, because Paul's already said, our free cash is gonna be, well over $35,000, let's buy it this year. And things like that you may be borrowing from one year to the next, but that's clearly that's a capital expense. It's an expense item that's a discrete expense item, and it's not people, and it's not an ongoing expense. It does come and go. So I think there are opportunities to move things around, and I'd like to explore those with you over the next few weeks as
We've talked about
this.
all of them.
Okay, good.
We're supposed to, and this thing, Mark, I mean, we're supposed to be purchasing 2 vehicles. And the reason why it's not a capital expense is that the police vehicles only last 3 years.
No, I understand. It's a budgeted.
And you're right, I mean, we can go, there's a lot of specific items. I guess what I want to convey to you and to all members of the board is that we've been through all of it. And we're happy to discuss how something ended up in here or didn't end up in here. But in terms of looking at all those kind of tricks of the trade, if you will, we've been through all those internally as well. So I just don't want you to think we didn't give it some thought.
And I'm not accusing you of not doing it. I'm just saying that you're doing this from a financial, budgetary, and management perspective, and we've got to look at this from a political and community and people perspective. Do people want this, and what are we giving up that people want? And I have heard many times that people want that extra tennis court or 4 that's over on Bliss Field for a different reason. And the letters we got, and the letters we'll get again, was, I pay $4,700 a year in taxes, and the only thing I use in town is the clay courts. I want my taxes to go toward the clay courts. Now, they don't have the right to say that, but there are people who clearly believe that, and I think they get to be listened to. They may not get to be everybody get their way, but they get to be listened to.
It is a heavily used asset, there's no doubt about it.
Well, Stephen and I have had the discussion twice offline this week on the same issue. So
Yeah.
and Stephen's being pretty quiet. I appreciate you holding down it, because I've been beaten on the same issue. But I think we have to acknowledge another thing too. Stephen, as the town manager, has to present a balanced budget, a well-thought-out budget, and he's got to have something that is paid for in advance instead of waiting for money to come in on the catch. Because we could just as easily really tear him up if he was caught him waiting for money and it didn't come in. So
I'm not arguing with that, Richard, but I will say that to a large extent, we have made conservatively, I hope, and I agree with, budget revenue assumptions. And every year we thankfully are pleasantly surprised that the revenue's been a little bit higher than we've anticipated, because the year that comes that's lower than we anticipate, we're going to be here in December and January making cuts to the budget, and that's not a pleasant thing to do. But the issue is, how are we going to sort through this? And we've got 2 or 3 weeks to do it, and I expect we will. But I'm sitting here saying let's work together and we'll get this thing right.
Okay. I just had one more question. In the revenue section, line 62, it shows for transportation. I don't understand why it says you make money like 12,000 and then there's zeros.
School
Anybody-
transportation.
Maybe Tom, you can answer that question. On the second page of this, it says school special revenue, 62 transportation fees. It says 12,006, then it says 0, 12,006 is 0.
Yeah, we used to provide transportation services for Greenwood and for Montessori
Okay.
and for a couple other entities in town, and we would bill them back, so we would get the revenue to offset the invoices.
Okay.
That practice has stopped, so we no longer receive the revenue or the expenses associated with it. So initially, the budget had money because we anticipated providing the service. When we stopped, we zeroed it out. So it's no longer something that we are involved in. So there's no expenses or revenue associated to that service anymore.
So is this correct, then, or it says 0, but then last year it says 12?
So what it is there,
16, 17.
the column, the middle column that you see, the 12.6, is actually one of my projections back in September. The school department had already taken it out in 16. I still had it in my projection. And that's why you see it kind of flip-flop in and out. It's timing of when the estimates were made.
Stephen, one of the things that I notice in Wilbraham, they're having a lot of discussion about having a new middle school, having this big capital expense. And one of the selling points is that they feel that there can be a reduction in the annual operating expense. And with this DPW facility, do we have any information to suggest that we could save money by having the new facility?
It's funny you say that, because he and I had the same conversation where I made the comment that somewhat counterintuitively, one of the ways we can help relieve the pressure under this mill rate cap that we're going to be confronting is through new facilities, borrowing to build new facilities that are more efficient, energy efficient, and also operationally efficient. So the operating budget, which is funded by the taxes generated by the mill rate, are in less demand, but our taxes overall are going to be higher because we're going to be paying the debt service. But it's really, and this is something that, this is complicated for the folks watching at home, I think, but the tax, you can do the debt exclusions on top of the mill rate. So
Right.
the new DPW facility does not add or does not add to the tax levy pressure that we're
Right.
confronting right now.
Right.
It adds to our taxes, but not the pressure on the operating budget. But I do believe fully, and this is mostly anecdotal based on interacting with Weston Sampson, who's built dozens of these. Operational costs do go down. I think similarly in future years.
But we don't have
middle
anything
school.
specific.
It's not quantifiable at this point.
I mean, because like with the middle schools, like they've got a real specific number. It's like we're gonna save $200,000 a year because of this middle school. I mean, I guess what I'm thinking
I can
about-
make something up like that, but
All right, okay,
yeah.
all right. I mean, because I haven't seen any study that said that we're gonna save any money.
You need to have the design really nailed down to a greater degree before I think you can do that, because you have to have your specifications for your equipment, your HVAC, things like that. But we can get to a point through this process where I think we can project that. We're just not there yet. But I think.
Right, but this
But yeah, the answer is yes. I think that would
So
save
you
money.
think there'd be cost savings, operational cost savings, but it's not gonna help us here?
Not this year.
Alex, just keep in mind, in Wilbraham, my understanding is they're going from 2 middle schools, one in Wilbraham, one in Hamden, to 1. Because in our experience, when we built the high school here, our operating costs didn't go down that very much because we bumped up the
And that may
maintenance
be the
costs.
case. I mean,
Right.
everything I've seen is it's not a money saver, but
Right.
I was inquiring.
Okay.
I had one other thing, Stephen, on the utilities this year. How are you, in this year's budget as opposed to the budget year we're finishing? Do you carry through the same estimates?
So we project. I'll let him talk about utility costs. We did for gas, for fuel, like vehicle fuel and diesel. We just locked in for the fiscal year, for next fiscal year, 2 weeks ago.
About 2 weeks ago.
And we got a really, and I want to commend Chad Thompson, our purchasing director. We got an extremely favorable rate by locking in when we did. So that number is known. Now the number per unit is
Right,
known,
number per
and then we
unit.
just go based on our experience. We have a long experience of tracking our usage, and so those numbers I don't think fluctuate wildly.
Well, this year, you have to have had fluctuation.
Lower because of.
Oh, yeah, I mean, this is, we hope it's not an anomaly.
No, we locked in about 30% less. than we're
30%
currently
less?
paying when it comes to diesel and the gas for the vehicles.
Okay.
I mean, as far as some of the other utilities, mainly electricity, there's a couple things going on that we're finding. While our rate might have went up a little bit, the expenditure trends, whether it's because of the new lighting that are in certain buildings, whether it's because we're involved with net metering credits, we've actually reduced fairly substantially a number of those line items based upon the expenditure trends of last year and the first 6 months of this year. That, especially when you go into the DPW, you're going to see, like the streetlights as an example, there's a fairly significant decrease in that line item. There are other utilities for town buildings, and again, it's because of the expenditure trends going on over the last year and a half or so.
So then you're showing a 30% reduction then on some of the, on some of those costs?
I was showing a 30%, definitely on the fuels that we're using for vehicles, and I can't say it's 30% or so on those other electrical line items, but there is a reduction.
How much is it off the top of your head? Are we talking 10,000, 50,000?
for, very quickly as an example, I think for the streetlights itself, I thought we had reduced it.
I'm more or less worried about the weather-related utilities.
For the heating?
Yeah, the heating,
Yeah,
and,
we really didn't mess with that.
and your
all that
auto
much.
fuel and all that, and that kind of stuff. Which you're locked in for 1 year. I'm just concerned that we didn't create an empty box and it comes back next year and fills back up on us.
Well, again, we took the expenditure trends of last year too into consideration. Last year was not a warm winter.
Right, it was not a
So,
warm
I
winter.
mean, and we only took it for 6 months, so we really didn't even realize the warmness of January and February
Right.
today when we looked at the numbers.
Yeah, because last year at this time, I believe we had, what, close to 3 foot of snow on the ground,
Right.
right now.
The FY16 budget as an example for just, again, as I said, the streetlights. The FY16 budget is $283,500. We're down at $260,000. We knocked it down $23,000. Again, based upon trend.
Yeah, trends, okay. Yeah, you know, my concern is just that
I
if
understand.
energy flips next year, then,
Again, we are locked in.
Yeah.
I can't see why the usage in this particular line item is going to change that much.
no, I'm worried about the end delivery cost, because, I mean, let's face it, we've taken a tremendous plunge in oil prices.
Right.
You know, and I think, Richard, to your point, this is more of a global point on municipal budgeting generally, if
Right.
you permit me. The point you raise is that, you know, if things change, then we have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
When we run short, if it's a cold winter, if prices spike, and we've locked in this line item for the entire fiscal year, well then, if we start running short in the accounts, we have a problem. And that's why you try and take conservative approaches towards expenditures for that reason. And when you get lucky, or you manage well, or both, that's when you have turnbacks or free cash, because your conservative assumptions were not needed. Unfortunately, this year we were less conservative than I would have liked to have been with a lot of these line items. But again, to deliver a balanced budget, we took more than we normally, I think, would. But that's, I think, utilities are a perfect example of something that we guess ahead on, and then so people say, well, how do you get free cash at the end of the year? You know, how did you not know what you were gonna, you know, how did you not spend what you budgeted? There are, you know, I said there's, you know, hundreds of line items in here. There are certain ones that are not predictable.
I would be more concerned with something happening, you coming back for reserve request for additional dollars for utilities. That's what I wanted. I just wanted to make sure you didn't take them down so low that it's going to turn into a liability,
Well,
that's all.
you're exactly right. We don't want to be in the position of doing that. Normally,
Right.
if you're able to be conservative with your assumptions, you don't have to. You hopefully avoid that situation. The reserve fund is there for things like that, but it's $40,000.
It's 40,000 projected for next fiscal year.
I mean, if things go badly for expenditures, the reserve funds is not gonna come close to covering what we need. And hopefully, I think everyone's hope, as Mark alluded to, as we get to the final budget, revenue numbers look better, and we aren't in that position. But
Okay. Any other discussions for Stephen, or? Yeah, go ahead.
can I, before we do that,
Sure.
does everybody need more of the slides? 'Cause I know Marie and Tom, or Marie has a presentation you're gonna give. So I want to give her a chance to set that up. Is that we all set with this?
Mark had another question.
And then I'll let Kim talk. Stephen and Paul, one thing I would ask is, and I think we've asked for this, at least I've asked for this in the past, because of the ongoing shift in distributions within the DPW in the 5 departments, so people know there's roads and streets, there's buildings, maintenance, there's grounds, and then there's water and sewer. As we've redistributed that, is it possible for us to get just a year-to-year comparison of the consolidation of those? Is that in this?
I have that, Mark. It's just that, again, the budget was based.
Right.
But I'll get that to you.
Yeah, I understand why we did it and what we did, but I
Right.
think it would help me at least, you know, understand it if we go back and just look at the,
You wanted all the line
Apples to-
items side by side by department per
Yeah,
se,
the
so
way-
then you have the grand total to
We've done
compare
it
to
before,
previous
right.
years.
Yeah.
And we have it updated. Again, it's not fully updated because of the last minute changes here.
Yeah, and-
We'll get it to you for Wednesday.
okay, and I think it's meaningful so people at home hear that, was it 3 years ago that we undertook a time study to find out how much time people were spending in each of the areas of the DPW so that we could better distribute charges of personnel charges amongst it's primarily water, sewer, and other things, but even within those, grounds, building maintenance, and streets. And rather than make the shift in 1 year,
This is the last year.
This is the last year of
three-year
moving-
shift.
of-
And our FY17 is the last year.
Yeah.
And again, people will notice that, again, the sewer salaries have gone down because they were the main ones who were affected by the cost allocations.
Kim?
I just wanted to just kind of piggyback on what Alex was saying about what they're doing in Hampton Wilbraham with the middle schools. And when they're joining the 2 middle schools, they're talking about a reduction in cost. And I know that we've talked a bit about joining our 2 middle schools. We haven't fully researched it enough, but I know, Marie, you've mentioned at times that there could possibly be a savings if we were to join our middle schools. So I feel like if we want to think about ways to reduce the entire budget, which would not just be ours, but it would be the town budget, I think we need to consider the middle schools as some sort of project that is of importance, because we know we're going to have to, because with that 2022 date approaching, we need to look at all the areas we can reduce costs, and if the middle schools is an area, I think we need to move that to a priority with the rest of the projects.
Richard, can I just piggyback on that?
Yeah, and then,
I mean,
then we'll get to
yes. I mean, we're spending a lot of time talking about this levy limit, and all of that depends on real estate values. And when we had this presentation, we never got an analysis of where we expect real estate to go. And all of this assumes that real estate's gonna stay flat, for the next several years, and after it's been flat for a number of years prior to. It seems to me that if we're gonna base policy decisions based on that ceiling, then we have to have a much better understanding of where real estate values are likely to go, and not simply assume that it's going to be flat. I mean, if we're not going to base policy decisions on that, then we can just kind of see where it goes. But I mean, it seems a little irresponsible to make an assumption about real estate values when we really have no understanding of it that's been presented to us. So I think that's something we have to look at. If we're really going to think of that as Armageddon, for the town budget.
well, this is part of what we've been talking to Pioneer Valley about. That's part of what they're working on with Stephen, is the whole rollout, and the rollout likely won't be, for several months?
Yeah,
The entire rollout.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is new growth. Where can we find new growth? Where can we, because we are built out.
No, I get that part, but I'm talking about existing real estate.
I mean, I guess I somewhat tongue-in-cheek would say that if I was good at predicting where real estate markets were going, I probably wouldn't be working here. I think in 2007 they said it was going to keep going up.
Well, that's why we want somebody besides
right,
you.
But I think I guess the two things I'll say is it's not an exact science predicting where real estate values are going to go, and we certainly the entire country has been burned by people saying they were going to go up indefinitely. The other thing I'll say is this calculation of the mill rate that we're talking about is based on the assessed value certified by the Department of Revenue, which is a look back at previous years. So in 2022, say in the summer of 2022, prices spike, something great happens. They discover there's gold in them there hills, and prices spike on real estate in the town. 2022, fiscal year 2022's budget will still be up against the cap because it's looking at property values from 2020. And I think that's the one thing is, yes, I agree with you. I would like to have some kind of sense of where this thing's going to go as we look at long-term planning. But in terms of getting through that one budget year, the values are looking back at the previous 12 to 18 months.
Liz?
Just a couple. Okay. You had talked about, again, levy limit. What is the select board or town manager doing to push Boston and the government to raise that levy limit? Have you taken steps to investigate that or to tell the government that we are almost close to our levy limit and we need to do something about it?
We've had numerous conversations with Senator Lesser, including one just last week, and it specifically brought to his attention again. And apparently, the reason it's not getting much traction is there's only like 2 or 3 communities that are even close to as bad a shape as we are on the tax limit. Most of them, I mean, there's some are only at $6 and $7. I mean, you get into the tax limit, it's ridiculous. So it's not a major bubble on anybody's forecast, but it is on ours.
Right.
Because we can see ourselves creeping towards that. He's been advised on that every time I've talked to him this year. I've talked to Michael several times. I believe some of the board members have even mentioned it, but he's very much aware of that, and we've kept him in the loop on what we're trying to do with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to look at, and it's not just this tax rate, it's look at how we manage the whole community. You know, do we reinvent the community on how we do zoning and everything else to enhance the values of the properties? There's a lot of things that they're going to be looking at. Now, there's going to be, all of them are going to be hard sells, but, you know, you can't discount the fact that we have a tremendous amount of properties still within our community that could be developed. And we're not moving forward with it yet, and so there is that out there, too. That's another piece of the puzzle to put on. But yes, it is being mentioned.
Okay, well, I just think maybe that you have a whole community who understands the problem that you keep talking about, so maybe we could use the community, like have every community member sign a petition or something like that, you know,
Or encourage them to write letters.
Right, write letters to, I mean, maybe you could help the community tell us who we should be writing.
Well, Springfield is my understanding, I don't know what year it happened, but they actually did cap out. And they went back and reinvented themselves and come back out of the hole. But they hit a point, they hit the wall. Stephen, do you know how long ago it was?
It was during the control board era, or it may have been the thing that prompted the control board to take over. That would have been the mid-2000s.
Yeah, it's not that far back, and I read an article on it, but I didn't pay that much attention when I read it, because I thought, well, they were able to climb back out, but then I looked at them and I said, well, they had all the property they could develop, so they just needed to refocus. But in our case, we don't have much to refocus on, Liz. That's our problem, the way we're seeing it. There's very little ground to focus on.
Yeah.
Except for Alex says, if the housing values can keep going up, and the flip side of that, there is a point where people can't afford the taxes, especially the senior community. And by the same time this peaks out, we're going to have 20% of our community 65 and older.
Right.
Now, for a bedroom community and for a school community and people coming in and dual families, yeah, they can keep it going. But I think it's that segment of our population that is permanent, more or less permanent residents. We don't know what's going to happen to them.
Right.
And that includes me too, because I'm a retiree.
Right. Well, I just,
Yeah, I can't pass it on anymore. I can't work a couple extra hours a week.
right. I just think maybe getting the community more involved.
Okay.
Anyway, how much went into your free cash reserve fund as of the last time it was certified? Do you have that number?
So last fall,
It was the fall?
it was in the fall, it was like 63,000 or
Well,
something like that.
the free cash number, again, I don't know exactly what you're looking at, but in FY15, the free cash was certified at almost 1.7 million.
Okay.
Last year, FY16, the amount was certified at just over $1 million. I'm anticipating that next year, that free cash will be certified somewhat, a little bit north of 600,000.
Okay.
We did put aside $53,000 into the operational stabilization fund this year, as opposed to almost $700,000 a year ago.
Okay.
So those amounts are diminishing.
And Liz, I think that's the important number. It's not how much free cash you have, but it's how much you have when all's said and done to put back into the stabilization fund, because what we really did is postponed expenses to the fall and paid for them out of free cash. And,
Right.
and you know, and so it's clearly not something you want to do, is overtax and have free cash. But when you don't
Right.
have it left over, it means you really didn't have it anyway.
Right.
I'll just add to the select board have a policy where they take free cash and the operational stabilization fund, because both are not committed in any which way, shape, or
Right.
form. And the combination of the two they have a policy when applied to the operating revenues, it should be in the vicinity of 5 to 10%. When we looked at them July 1st of 2016, they were roughly about 6.5%. I'm projecting that amount to go down with the reserves projected for next year to maybe about 5.75%. So it's not, again, it's going in the opposite direction, obviously, we would like it to.
Right, and the money that we return after our budget season, that goes into the free cash?
Yes.
Okay. And then, two other things. Is the town asking for any more money for DPW site exploration or design or anything like that in this
spring?
budget?
It's not in the budget, but I don't know if there's anything in for special articles.
We haven't, not yet,
Okay, or the senior center, do you know?
not yet. We haven't done the warrant yet. And to some extent, we have to figure out the budget, to figure out if there's gonna be free cash to fund any of that additional work. The thing, and I think I may have said this before, the select board also has a policy of not using free cash for operational expenses, and that's one of the reasons why, even though we had free cash there, we chose not to balance the budget using it. Especially with the increased costs for kindergarten or keeping class size down or what have you, or even the increased costs on the police side. It's only a one-year fix. The same cost is going to be there next year, except a little higher, and the revenues won't grow at that same pace. And so you're in almost a worse position next year if you use free cash. I mean, if there's a way as we get to the budget, as Mark alluded to look at things that could be viewed as one-time or non-reoccurring costs that you could use free cash to supplement, maybe that's an approach that we look at. But, we have a lot of capital needs that aren't being met. And that's, as Mark said, you usually go back in the fall, and when there's something that, whether it's snow and ice or, a project that didn't get funded under the capital because the budget wasn't there, free cash, I think, is appropriate for that. But to just plug it into operational line items really is, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. It's not a good way to run the railroad.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I guess that's it for now.
Oh, excuse me, you through, Liz?
Yes, I think so.
You just said something that concerns me. You said we're going in the wrong direction for those funds. And I remember you saying last year, our bond rating, we really held on, barely, because we hadn't gone in the right direction, and now we're still slipping back. Is that something we really should look at again, because it's going to affect the schools as well as us when we go to borrow money?
Absolutely. I mean, we shouldn't be, again, your policy is 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
You're at the low end of your policy range now. And as it turns out, unless there's a lot of turnbacks this year, what I anticipate for free cash, again, somewhere a little bit north of 600,000. And when I add that to what the stabilization fund balance is, which is really not going to change between now and July 1st, and apply that to next year's revenues, the numbers are what they are. They're not increasing.
Do they look at us every year?
They basically only look at us when we're out in the bond market. So unless we're out in the bond market within the next, year and a half or so, it won't have any effect. But if we're out in the bond market in 2019, we'll be looking at potentially 2017 or 18 results. So, we have time to steer the ship in the right direction. I don't anticipate us being out in the bond market. Wouldn't think, unless we're out with the DPW, that would be the next probably project that would be on the bond market. But again, when that falls into place, that's when they'll be looking at us.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So Stephen, when I look at capital funding OPEB for last year, do you know what the number was that you saved towards those two amounts?
For capital, we actually budgeted $1,416,000. And again, this year is the 1512.
1512.
And as far as OPEB is concerned, the money in the 16 budget is 237.3.
200 and what?
237,300,
Okay.
and we are going up to what is proposed, what Stephen has proposed is 275,800.
Okay. And what's the overall increase? You said you went more than 2.25, but less than 2.5?
I mean, we're $30,000 away. It's probably like 2.48. It's something ridiculous.
Okay, so you basically went
Yeah,
there.
I mean, we're almost there. It might be 2.45.
Is there a state, the amounts that we're contributing to those are limits that are set by the select board?
There's a policy. issue, yes.
Policy?
Yes.
Not like a state mandate that we put a certain amount into those?
I wish there was a state mandate.
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't be talking about it. We wouldn't be able to play with it.
Yeah, I mean, the only state mandate is we can't go above the 2.5% there.
Right.
But, I mean, that's the only ceiling that's placed
Yeah.
statewide. Everything else is internal policy.
By nation standards, if you go to the facility management gods, we are so vastly underfunding our capital program, it's not even worth having a discussion over. I mean, we should have, with the schools and everything that we got in here, we could have a $10 to $15 million capital program every year to be where we should be on standards. We're that much under. It's kind of scary compared to where we should be. Now, will we ever be where we should be? I doubt it, because we'll never have that money. But if you went on a national standard, what they tell you to set up when you're setting up budgets and all for facility management and for infrastructure management, that they call it total cost of ownership, you want a fair percentage being put away each year or put into maintenance that reflects the cost of the replacement of that structure. And, you know, like the high school really makes me nervous because they got an $80 million structure we just put online. And we're on the honeymoon right now. Everything's brand new. 5 to 10 years down the road is when it's going to start to get scary. And that's when the pressure is going to be placed on people, and that's when you're going to, if you're still around on the committees, you're going to see large purchases being put into subsystem replacements when they come due.
Richard?
Yeah.
So, to kind of put a further point on your question, Kim, the OPEB is purely a matter of policy. At one point, it was 0. And at one point, we had our auditors come in, and I asked the question, is there a material difference between what we were putting into OPEB and 0? And he said no. So it's more of a symbolic move that we're making with the OPEB. A lot of towns don't do it kind of for that reason. So, but, you know, there are arguments back and forth.
We have an unfunded obligation. This is essentially medical benefits for retirees, that it'll be audited again, but I think the last one was $21 million or
A little bit higher, it's like
35.
30 million.
Yeah,
whatever
30
it
million.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a number that most of us can't figure out how we'd ever pay for it if we really needed to come up with it in one year.
If I could just,
Sure.
Alex, you're right, and we have talked about that here a lot, and it is somewhat maddening, and Mark's made the comment that we're either really smart or really dumb for doing it because it's such, every community is impacted. I mean, there's only probably a handful of fully funded communities.
We're one of the 8 smartest and one of the 8 dumbest
Right.
communities in Massachusetts.
But the thing I'll say is, it's probably, even in the 2 years that we've been talking about it, it's probably now 38. I remember I went to, at the MMA, I was in a session, and they said, who here now has an OPEB trust fund set up? And I remember last year it was 8 people in the session, and this year it was 40 people. So it is something that it may not be a material difference, but it is a difference, and I think every community is getting the same message from credit rating agencies, from DOR, from the people who have some input into how we manage our finances, and they all want to see contributions, even if they are just this side of symbolic. And that's where I agree with you. It's what's the right number. We debate that, but I do. It has to be something, and we are probably on the low end of what we should be contributing on that as well.
Our last credit rating, they did say that
On
up
our
until
conference
that
call, they
point,
did.
it was a lower emphasis, but they said it's growing.
Yep.
And they're starting to really look at that now because Kim, it's a liability that is going to be there. It's not a hypothetical liability.
Well, no, it's there now.
Yeah, it's there now.
Paul, the question is, how much money do we spend every year on medical benefits for retirees? And if it was fully funded, that number would be zero. You know,
The trust fund would
Right,
pay.
if the trust fund was fully funded, we have $30 million in the bank to pay for it.
Right.
But we budget annually just over, I have 1.1 million in for retiree benefits.
right.
If we were fully funding on an actuarial determined schedule to fully fund our liability, we'd be kicking in probably another $2 million towards that. But we were more or less pay as you go with a small amount towards that $2 million extra.
And the smartest communities, Mark, to your point, are now the ones, the handful and counting, that are getting up to fully funded because they've made the priority to do it. Now,
Right.
we were in that financial situation with the ability to do that. We're not.
Because we've got to pay it anyway.
Yeah.
We can't shed the cost to anyone at this point. We pay it every year out of our budget, so it comes right off the top.
Yeah.
And that amount of money is growing every year. Every retiree goes out, it goes up. So it's not stopping. The charts are going the wrong way on us. But you're right. Alex's point's right. Well, who knows in the future? Well, we know what it is today, and we know people are going to retire, and we know we got to pay them. Either that or we're bankrupt. Okay, Russ.
So I'm involved in creating OPEB trusts for a lot of my clients, most of them. And you're right, a lot of them did create them. They're not funding them. So there might be 40, but out of the clients I have, at least in this area, which is the vast majority of school systems, they're not funding the OPEB trust fund. They created it, it sits there. Sometimes they put in 20 grand or 50 grand, it's very small amounts. And I think, to cut to the chase, I mean, really, I think what the committee was thinking, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know I was thinking this, that if we looked at that symbolic amount you had last year for those savings versus this year, and the difference is about 134K based on what you just said, and we also look at free cash for the approximately 100,000 that we're going to get in additional Chapter 7 raise the following year, because that's really a one-time deal. We won't get it this year, but we will get it the following year. That's 234,000. We're over by 308. I mean, I think there's a way to manage this so that we could come to a number that doesn't cause cuts on the town side. It's a different policy decision, definitely. And I'm not saying in any way that you shouldn't save money. It's really, I think we'd ask you to save about what you did last year instead of the increased amount for this year. Obviously, that's not within my purview. That's simply, I think, our thought process, and I want to get it out on the table. That's kind of what we're thinking. I would have said the same thing between 2.25 and 2.5, and then we probably would have been there. But it looks like you had to go higher than you thought you did. That's really, I think, where we are. And the only other clarification I wanted to add is the kindergarten is one of the issues, but we would also have to cut the Williams middle school teachers or music. I mean, it's really a three-prong issue we have right now. So the 808, it's not just kindergarten would go away, it's really Williams would have to go away too, those middle school teachers.
And maybe with that, Richard, should we?
If they're through with the discussion.
It can continue.
Is there any more discussions for Stephen?
Effortless segue there, Janet. Nicely done, yeah.
Okay, no more discussions. Okay, you guys stay. Need anything else set up, Marie, or are you all set?
All set, just need to. I'd like to thank the Select Board for letting us come to present and discuss our budget with you. I also would like to talk a little bit about the process. The budget season starts with the administrative team looking at what we need, what we can live without, what changes there are to enrollment, and we make adjustments to the budget. That starts months and months ago. We look at what the town allocation is. We try to live within that allocation. And when we present to the school committee, we do present what that budget would be if it was an $808,000 increase. I'd like to thank Tom Mazza, who's done a Herculean job of going through several scenarios and presenting them to us, as well as keeping us updated, and to Susan Bertrand for a lot of her work on the team. So let's now go through the budget. First of all, our vision is to have students completing an education at Long Meadow Public Schools. They will be fully capable of excelling in a global community. Our mission is to prepare learners to achieve to their full potential, cultivate confident, critical thinkers and problem solvers, develop the skills and habits of mind for lifelong learning, contribute to a global community, and maintain a safe environment. We've had many accomplishments over the past year, and I think this is important to note so that people know where their money's going and what the successes of the district have been. The Niche Report ranks Long Meadow High 25th out of 100 schools, and the Niche Report ranks Long Meadow Public Schools 24th out of 100 in Massachusetts. Pioneer Valley Teachers Award recognizes excellent teachers every year. We have outstanding teachers, and we like to make sure that we share that information with everyone. Long Meadow High School, Glenbrook Middle School, and Williams Middle School achieved Level 1 status as designated by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And we had 4 community presentations this year for parents in the community by Dr. Poteet, Christine Duvivier, Lynn Lyon, Shelley Warren, and Pam Chaplin. Technology implementation continues to be a huge success. We now have technology in all the schools. It's being utilized on a daily basis from kindergarten through grade 12. We have a new elementary math program. We purchased materials last year. We have ongoing staff development, and that is similar curriculum now in all 3 elementary schools. We continue collaboration among the schools. We're trying to do exit materials for grade 8 so that all students are prepared to enter grade 9 and meet the expectations of teachers there, as well as exit expectations for grade 5 so that students are prepared for grade 6. We have science and social studies reviews underway, common data implementation in the elementary and middle schools. Bring your own devices at grade 8 has been implemented so that we can begin to be more fiscally responsible around technology. We have bring your own device at the high school, which was implemented last year quite successfully. So we're piloting in grade 8 and hoping to expand that to 6 through 8 by next year. We continue to make progress in literacy. It's been a 5-year mission. We've changed our approach to literacy. We've done lots of staff development. We've purchased lots of materials, and we're seeing more and more success with our students' ability to read and write and comprehend. Our fine arts accomplishments are noteworthy throughout the state as well as nationally. Our music program excels. We have outstanding arts programs in all areas. Last year, we put in full-time adjustment counselors at the elementary level. That's been well received. We find that we're able to help more students who are struggling. We have social skills programs underway at Center and Wool Swamp. Advisory committees are up and running, and advisory for students at both middle schools. Elementary collaboration time is in place. That was a result of the contract last year, so teachers at the elementary level are spending more time on developing math curriculum, literacy curriculum, looking at student achievement, and sharing assessments. The high school has had a surge in women's health programs, including RAD, Rape Aggression Defense course, as well as women's PE courses and more. We've added AP macroeconomics, we've added foundations of English, and we've increased sections of community service learning at the high school. In literacy, we continue to implement the elementary balanced literacy, including readers and writers workshop. We've updated elementary and middle school classroom libraries. Foundations is a new program that's phonics that's being implemented at grades 1 to 2. Word study is being implemented this year. That's vocabulary in 4th and 5th grades. And we have writing to text implemented at the high school. In math, it's the first year of the K-5 math expressions at the elementary school. The middle school continues to align the scope and sequence for science. In the Long Meadows High School, added the new Algebra 2 text this year. We purchased it at the end of last year out of funds, end of the year funds. In social studies, elementary scope and sequence review is underway. Middle school scope and sequence is also underway. And it's the first year with the new text in world history at the high school. In science, the middle and high schools are aligning curriculum with the NSTA and NCR's Next Generation Science Standards, and elementary committees are piloting and choosing new science texts and materials. The committee just went over to West Springfield to look at a program yesterday that they're using that's online learning. In technology, there are new standards implemented in grade 8, K through 8. Last year, our tech teachers looked at that so that it's updated in preparation for Park. And also, we did it because as we've brought new technology into the schools, student skills are getting stronger and stronger every year. We've moved to using more Chromebooks. They're more cost-effective than the iPads, and we're finding that they're well-received by teachers and students. But we have Chromebooks, iPads, and laptops in all the schools. The Bring Your Own Device model has been expanded. The district technology plan is under review. The committee is met, and we're going to be updating you once the technology committee looks at a 3-year plan. Video production studios are in all the schools at this point, and technology integration is occurring across the curriculum. I think one thing Long Meadow can be most proud of is the community service. We're a high-achieving, privileged district, and the students and staff continue to give back time and time again. We could put up pages and pages of projects that are going on in our schools, but these are just some of them. Helping Hand Sandwiches, Makers for the Homeless, Pennies for Patients to support those fighting cancer, toiletry collection for the Springfield Rescue Mission, non-perishable collections for A Hope for Every Child, holiday gift baskets for children in need, book drives for the Springfield Public Schools, Jump Rope for Heart, collections for the Long Meadow Food Pantry, Dakin Animal Shelter collections, Mayflower Marathon food donations, Can Jam Tournament to benefit cystic fibrosis, and Key Club members who volunteer continuously in the community. We continue collaboration among schools. I talked a little bit about that already. One thing that we look at is how do our students do by the time they're done with their K through 12 experience in Long Meadow, and they do extremely well. This shows you our SAT scores as compared to the Massachusetts average and the national average. You can see that Long Meadow outperforms the Massachusetts average and national average in all areas: critical reading, math, writing, and the SAT combined. Also, we have students who excel on our advanced placement statistics. This is one of the reasons that we often rank so highly on the niche report, and we show up on things like Newsweek's top high schools, etc. We had 211 students who took a total of 480 AP exams. 90% scored 3 or above on a 1-5 scale. We had 62 federal presidential academic excellence awards, 38 advanced placement scholars, 47 advanced placement scholars with honors or distinction, and 8 advanced placement national scholars. All of that shapes the administrative team thinking, what is it that the students need? What is it that we need to do to improve achievement? We look at MCAS data, we look at the SATs, and we're always adjusting and seeing what we need to do differently in order to enhance the experience of our students. So data-driven analysis of student learning and achievement is a factor that influences the budget as well as strategic plan, enrollment projections, free full-day kindergarten, special education, ELL programming. We've seen an increase in the number of students moving to town in ELL, staffing, contractual obligations, instructional materials for curriculum reviews, technology implementation, transportation, mandates and regulations such as Common Core assessment, educator evaluation, special education, and state reimbursement. This is an FY17 budget summary. In the general fund, you can see that we're asking for $1,108,000 increase over last year. The grants, we've seen a decline in revenue at $4,800 difference from last year. The special revenues line, there's a deficit of $582,000, and that primarily is to do with about $350,000 in a reduction of kindergarten fee, but there are other areas where the special revenues have dropped as well. That makes a change in our budget of $520,924. Here's our budget by fund. You can see that that general fund is 92% of what we spend. We also have circuit breaker, the METCO grant, school choice, regular education grants, special education grants, and other special revenues. This shows you the budget by location. We have 33%, which is pupil services, which is one of the larger chunks of our budget. We also see that that each of the schools, it breaks it down into what each school gets: instructional development, pupil services, technology, maintenance, in the various schools. Here's the budget by control group. Professional salaries make up 63% of our budget. We have contracted services making up 20% of the budget, and then other areas of supplies and materials, other expenses, town technology, other salaries, and clerical salaries. There are many changes to the budget, and here's a breakdown of how the budget changed from FY16 to FY17. We first look at enrollment to see where we can make reductions based on changes in class size. So we were able to reduce one section at Blueberry, 0.6 Blueberry special education teacher, 0.5 kindergarten teacher, and that's the part-time position based on the premise that we are going with full-day kindergarten. 0.5 center kindergarten assistant, and 3 district special education assistants. We made other reductions which we did to reduce the budget, not necessarily because we don't need the positions. We reduced 3 library assistants, out-of-district tuitions, school choice funding, attrition, utilities, and miscellaneous reductions. There were additions to the budget which we needed to add back in. That's cost of living increases, step increases, salary advancement for continued education, transportation services, special education evaluations and services, a .2 foreign language for the middle school enrollment changes, instructional elementary math materials, 1 library media specialist middle schools, and an increase in OT services. This gives you a breakdown of what the budget additions were. You can see that there's a dollar figure next to all of it that brings you to the $1,167,249. The cost of living increases and step increases take a sizable chunk of the budget, as you can see.
And the salary advancement for continuing education, that's just the horizontal movement on the teacher scale?
It is. Teachers, if they get a master's degree or they get more credits, they're able to move up on the salary scale.
What's OT services?
Excuse me?
What's OT services?
Occupational therapy. And that again depends on the individual education plans, and we saw an increase in the demand for more occupational therapy services. Here's the dollar figures associated with the budget reductions. Again, I already named those for you, so I'll give you a minute to look at those numbers.
The out-of-district tuitions, is that special ed?
It is. Those are students that go to schools outside of Longmeadow, and there's a reduction because some students are graduating out or aging out, so we're able to reduce in that that area. We've also been building in-house programs to bring more students home because it's more cost-effective and better for students, I believe, to educate in our home district. Okay. So the budget additions totaled $1,167,249. We were able to reduce $646,325 for a real increase to our budget of $520,924. Universal kindergarten is becoming a norm around the state. State legislature is also working on supporting free full-day kindergarten in all districts. We believe this is going to be mandated within the next few years, and we believe that it's the right thing to do. There are many benefits of full-day kindergarten, and I'd like to just go through a few of them with you right now. Research comparing half and full-day kindergarten suggests that children benefit more from a developmentally appropriate full-day kindergarten as part of an early learning continuum. Full-day kindergartners are more prepared for school. They do better with the transition to first grade, showing significant gains in school socialization and are equipped with stronger learning skills. They have higher academic achievement in later grades, better attendance in kindergarten and through primary grades. They show faster gains in literacy and language measures when compared to half-day kindergarten students. They have enhanced social, emotional, and behavioral development, and they have reduced retention and remediation rates. And this comes from the Child Defense Organization. If we were to be funded for full-day kindergarten, then there would be reimbursement to the town of Long Meadow 1 year out. We would receive additional funding for offering full-day kindergarten. It would be based on the previous year's enrollment. It is approximately $635 per student, so we believe that in FY18 we would receive approximately $100,000 back to the town. Historically, we looked at the increases. I think that there were years where we received less than what we needed. We continued to erode that base. I think that the last year was a generous allocation by the town. We're at the point right now where we're looking at cutting programs, and we're looking at cutting teachers that would be detrimental to the district should we have to make them. So in FY17, we're asking for a 2.52, we were allocated 2.52 increase, but we're looking for that $1 million increase. What is the impact of inadequately funding the general fund? We will look at teacher reductions, programmatic reductions, such as the 4 teachers at Williams Middle School. We increase class size, decrease student services, decrease teacher time with students, potential lower student achievement, and the inability to add new initiatives such as the health curriculum that was recommended this year. That is not on any of the lists, but we're sadly not able to fund grade 5 health, which is really a pressing need for our students.
Grade 5 health?
Right. We had a health committee that talked about curriculum and what students' needs are. We surveyed parents, and parents, teachers, and students, and we believe that we really should be adding health to 4th and 5th grade.
And how many positions would that take?
It would be a 0.2 increase to provide elementary health at all 3 elementary schools for grade 5.
So how much money would that?
Do you remember?
I think it was with curriculum $25,000 or so.
24,429.
Good memory.
So for 24,429, we could have elementary health education for 4th and 5th graders?
Just 5th grade.
Just 5th grade.
The plan was to roll it out over 2 years. Next year, we were hoping to roll it out for grade 5, and the following year to roll it out for grade 4. So the budget would increase the following year by another approximately $25,000. So the FY17 approved school committee budget is the following. The revised budget was $35,647,872. With the addition of free full-day kindergarten, which the school committee supports, it's a budget of $36,168,796. It's a general fund increase of $1,108,000, and it's a total budget increase of $520,924. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our residents, parents, senior citizens, staff, administrative team, select board, school committee, and students for making Long Meadow Public Schools so successful. I can't tell you how many parents come into my office and say that they're moving to town for the school system, but also because this is such a wonderful community to live in. During my 6 years in Long Meadow, the town has been extremely supportive of the school district, and I am most grateful for that, and I'm sure that we'll be able to work through this together. Thank you. And at this time, I will take any questions that you have. Marie?
Actually, the first question's for Paul. The reductions, did you reflect that in the unemployment costs that we'll see the upcoming year?
I think they actually, no, I did not. I did not amend the unemployment cost in which way, shape, or form.
So it might be an increase?
If they're dropping, I think, almost 4 full-time equivalents, yeah, that could have a potential of $75,000, $100,000 if they all went to the full maximums.
And then if full-day kindergarten would bring how many, what increase in benefit, number of benefit employees, teachers? So is it how many FTEs, is that how you call it?
Yeah,
If we went, everyone, we had 3 full-day.
If we went to full-day kindergarten, we would lose the half-time teacher and the half-time teacher's aide at Centre because we would no longer offer half-day. We're not mandated to do that. So it would be full-time, and we're not increasing positions.
I think what happens there, and it was part of their reductions, that they show a reduction of full-day kindergarten benefits, about $31,000. That was usually coming out of the tuition. Now that would have to come out of the general fund. So the general fund would be impacted by that, I think it's $31,000.
Well, I'm looking at the number of benefited employees.
Would change.
what we.
I don't think it would change. It's
It
just,
wouldn't
it's just
change.
that, again, their tuition was picking up the benefits. It would now be shifted to the general fund above and beyond that. And I think the number they had was 31,000
No.
within the reduction.
Yeah, Marie, right now, there's 4 teachers at center school. 3 of them are teaching full day, 1 of them's teaching half day. Next year, it's projected 3 full days, just the class size. The half-day children will be dispersed throughout all the full day, so right now, there's no extra full-time teacher.
Right.
So by Wednesday, would you know what the hit might be on the unemployment? Or is that just something we really won't know? for another
Again,
6
I mean,
months?
the calculation is, I think they're eligible for $635 per week, up to 26 weeks, so it's almost $20,000 to the max per employee. So, you know, if you have 5 employees that we're laying off, that potentially, if they all went to the max of their unemployment benefits, would be another $100,000.
Thank you.
In the employee benefits and liability line item on the general government side of that, I mean, I know you guys all know this, but for folks who may not be clear, the cost of those benefits is carried on what we call the town side of the budget.
So 4 employees laid off would
Could be
possibly
potentially
about
$80,000.
$80,000.
But, I mean, that's
Worst case
assuming,
scenario.
I mean, that's assuming these people who are qualified teachers don't get another job.
Don't get a job.
Correct.
So, Marie, on your SAT scores, I know this goes back a little bit. Where do we get this data? I mean, because I guess I'm real interested in this because, you know, like, how do we compare to similar school, some similar towns or that kind of thing? I mean, where do we get this information?
We get it from the state as well as the SAT reports back to us. And
Okay.
we get reports from the company.
So can we compare ourselves to, like, other towns in Long Meadow?
Absolutely,
I mean,
we've done
like-
that.
So how do we stack up
We
on-
fare very well in the area. Really, when we're looking at like districts, we're looking at districts like Wellesley that we compare with. When they put out like districts, we've compared to Marblehead, Reading, Wellesley, things like that. So, and that's based on socioeconomics. It's
Right,
based
right.
on, you know, how many students are in the district, plus things like scores.
Is that something that you guys could circulate to us? I mean, is it
Sure.
readily available?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
When you're doing the additions, the first 3 line items, the cost of living increases, step increase, and the salary advancement, those are, it's $814,000 of this $1.1 million budget. Those are things that we can't control, basically. Is that fair to say?
They're contractual obligations.
Contractual obligations.
Correct.
And then the transportation services, $115,000. Those were an unexpected mandated expense that came up this year.
Correct. Those are services, the increase is primarily due to an increase in the number of special education students who are receiving transportation services per their IEP.
So that's $930,000 of unexpected or mandated increases?
Absolutely.
Out of okay. And then in the special education evaluations and services are, the instructional math materials are basically to continue with our math program that we have right now. Without those, we can't use that program.
Right. It's now an annual cost because they're consumables used by students.
And the library media specialist at the middle schools, that's going to be shared between the 2 middle schools?
They had proposed doing away with the assistants that are in the library because as education is evolving, you really want a media specialist that can incorporate technology skills into the research that they're doing. So they proposed exchanging the 2 teaching assistants to get 1 media specialist to be shared between the 2 schools.
Okay.
Just a question about the school choice, you're gonna, how many students would that mean wouldn't get school choice if it's $51,000?
They still would get school choice each year. We elect to bring on, and the school committee just voted for 4 students annually, and once they're in the district, they stay. We take them in kindergarten. We have done that for the past several years, and they go through grade 12. Can you talk about the 51?
Yeah, the 51,000 reduction is associated to two costs in FY16's budget that we don't see moving forward. 30,000 was associated to the superintendent search. So when the school committee hired a firm and had costs associated to it, they elected to pay for it out of the school choice fund. There's an additional $20,000 legal settlement that, again, there weren't funds available in the special ed budget for it, that they chose to use school choice to pay for that one-time expense.
Okay, so the school choice program isn't going to be affected?
It is not.
Okay, it just looks, okay.
Jenny?
Yeah.
So just piggybacking off of what Kim was saying, you know, I know it's focused on the fact that we're asking for 300,000 more than what the town was willing to allocate. But if you look at just our mandated costs of contractual obligations and transportation, that's 930,474. That's not even, the 808 that we've been allocated doesn't even cover our mandates. So we're already making cuts just to meet our contractual obligations. Not, it's not level servicing, it's not adding new programs, it's not implementing anything different, but just to meet our contractual and mandated obligations, we already had to make 112,000 in cuts based off of the allocation from the town.
You know, Janet, one thing, because you made a reference to allocation, and I think maybe Marie, you made reference to allocation too. We haven't allocated anything. So, I mean, we really should go into this discussion realizing we have a blank board. Our board never voted to allocate you anything, one way or the other. There was really just a financial projection that Paul Pasturzik did, which was really sort of a mathematical exercise. That was not a policy decision that we ever made. So I don't feel like, you know, there's something that's been set in stone at this point, or,
No,
or
and
even in wet concrete, you know. So.
Or maybe being more clear, it would be
Yeah.
the, in the budget directive that was initiated by the town manager for the whole budget process for all the departments. That was, and when we had our last joint meeting about budget, that was the number that was given to us. So that's, you know, what we've taken as our allocation, whether it's fairly named that or not, that's where we're using that number from.
Okay, and I'm not trying to be critical.
No.
I just want people to remember, like, we have never voted to allocate you one number or another. And in prior years, you know, we've never told you, at least since I've been on this board in the last prior 2 years, you know, we've never said, look, this is your number and this is what you have to do. It just so happens the last couple of years, your budgets have sort of hit that kind of initial financial calculation that Paul has done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm not sure who's calling at this point.
Russ. I guess I'm taking questions and answers.
So according to my quick calculation here, it looks like we cut about $264,000 worth of staff under the budget reductions. And as a committee, what we talked about, we heard from a lot of residents about the middle school cuts that we were considering doing, which was about $220,000. And that's the 4 teachers in the Williams Middle School. We also heard from the music department and the kids in the music program, which, by the way, they were really well spoken, and I was very impressed that they'd come and speak with us on camera. And then we have the kindergarten issue. So the 808 really gets us into a situation where we lose the kindergarten idea and the Williams teachers, or something, some part of music, which we all want to avoid. This is a particular year where I think with the kindergarten, in my opinion, it's something that we're going to continue to be here year after year talking to you about kindergarten. It's either, as I said to the committee the other day, it's either we believe it's part of public education or it's not. If it's not, then let's charge enough to actually cover the other half of the day. If it is, then we should be charging people because it's something that they should be entitled to. everybody else in Massachusetts came to the conclusion that they're entitled to it, except for us. Now, we have unique circumstances because we're almost hitting $25 per thousand, and the levy ceiling is very serious, and I completely agree with the board on that point. This particular year, I think we could be creative and potentially resolve this issue for the moment. I'm not saying it's going to be resolved forever, because we have, every year, I think we're going to be cutting to try and make this happen further on down the road. But the additional savings in capital in particular, you know, that's not going to, this isn't going to delay hitting 25 by even a year probably. I mean, we're still going to hit 25. The only thing that potentially could is if the property values go up, or, you know, maybe you have the middle school combination and that saves some money because we're much more efficient with what we have and the debt service doesn't count against the limit. But I think if we're going to do it, you know, if it doesn't happen this year, it's got to happen next year or the year after. I mean, we're going to continue to have this discussion. This is a year when I think we could make it happen. It's not going to be easy to make it happen. I mean, we cut, a lot of the cuts we made here are with the assumption kindergarten happens. If it doesn't happen, we can't make some of these cuts because we're planning on having kindergarten happen. So 72,000 that the town asked us to look at and to cut, we agreed to do it, but it was really to try and make the kindergarten thing happen. If we can't do that, we probably can't save the 72, and we probably need to go back to cutting Williams. And none of us want to do that, because Williams, when we looked at the projections for enrollment, the average is around 23 to 24 kids per class. But that, you know, you got to look at what's the worst case scenario, and we already have classes from what some parents have told me at Williams that are up around 26, 27 now. So we cut another team, you could be up around, you know, close to 30.
29, 30.
Really. And I'm really reluctant to do that, especially when it looks like, you know, 2 years out, we might actually be able to look at that again, and the enrollment looks different at that point. But this particular year, it looks like it would be very tough to do it. Not that I want to cut a team at all, but this doesn't appear to be the year to do it. So we really wanted to present it to you in person so you get an idea of what we're facing, because it's not, we really did try to cut what we could. And initially, I was looking at the Williams myself and thinking we could cut that team. But when I looked at it more closely, it just really doesn't make sense this year. It might at some point in the future, but it really doesn't right now.
Russ, I just had a couple of things. One is, I do groups on a regular basis, and I know there's a big difference between 25 and 30. It's hard to believe that 5 people can make that much of a difference, but it really does change the group dynamics significantly. You mentioned that it seemed like the rest of the state was not charging for full-time kindergarten, but that's
Western
not,
Massachusetts,
yeah.
and most of Eastern Mass.
Yeah, but there are places in the state that still charge, right?
I think there are 74 districts within the state.
74 with it, because I know I'd heard that from your committee.
I think that was the presentation that I
And
did.
I believe there's 341 municipalities. I don't know how many.
I think
I don't
about
know if you're looking.
325.
Yeah. But in Western Mass, my understanding is there's none, except for us. Eastern Mass is where you see a few that are
Well,
charging.
again, and when, as Marie was saying, when you compare our SAT scores, our student success, you really have to compare us to eastern towns. You can't compare us to too many towns in Western Mass, you know, which is a positive thing, you know, that's not a criticism. Now, how many families would it affect if we had full-time kindergarten?
We don't know
Number of
exactly yet, but we're
students, or
estimating 140.
About 40 families?
Right.
40 students, 40?
Based on the trends, we're
140.
looking at 140 students.
140 students, all right. And then, now if this becomes, you know, like in Western Mass, if people say, wow, you know, it's like there's a fire sale in Long Meadow, you know, you could get kindergarten there for free now. And would that increase our costs if we had our enrollment significantly increased? I mean, how would that affect us, our budget?
I think it's actually the reverse of that. What I keep hearing is they're shocked when they come in and find out they're being charged. They're assuming we're not charging right now,
Right,
because
yeah.
nobody else is.
Right.
So it's not, and we already have everybody that could possibly get here to get into the school. They're here. We're getting school choice kids. You know, we have to do a lottery for all the extra kids that want to get into the town,
Right.
but they can't because they can't afford the housing.
Right, but if people move here under the premise that, you know, now that we don't charge? I mean, could we have any predictions about enrollment increases? Would this affect enrollment increases?
We started building the budget around 125 kindergarten students because we followed the census, but the census is never accurate. So we've been watching it grow, but this happens every year, so we look at our trends, and that's where we're coming up with the about 140. But typically, we do have to add a kindergarten section at some point, but we think about that, we watch, and we look over the summer. So are you asking, do we think we'd get a surge in
Like
enrollment?
if we increased another section, what's that cost? Yeah, I guess.
About $50,000. But we would use what we could with attrition and other funding. We always do that within our budget by moving things around when we have to add positions in the summertime. We've never come back to the town for more money.
But it would be illogical economically to move to a town that taxes the way we do, so you can save the $2,750 for 1 year. I mean, it's really, these people, from what I've heard, including, I have a lot of friends that are with preschool kids right now. What I hear is I moved here anyway, even though there was a kindergarten fee, so it didn't prevent these people from moving here. But when you look at, let's say your taxes are $8,000 on a typical home here, when in surrounding towns you might pay $4,000 or $5,000. And then on top of it, you find out your kid, you got to, pay $2,750 for your kid half-time for the second half of the kindergarten day. That's the type of thing that starts to dissuade people from moving here. Now, most of the people in this town, it doesn't have an effect on them because they can afford the $2,750. But I would argue that if it is public education, there shouldn't be one kid that can't come because they can't afford it, especially in this town. I mean, if your parents are serious enough about education to move here, then they should be able to go to kindergarten. If everybody else does for no charge, then I think we should too.
Well, and there's some, I'm sorry, there's some research that shows that for every dollar you spend on full-day kindergarten education, you save money in the future. I can't remember what the number is. It's $3 to $4 in the future, and I feel like we have to think about that too. Also, providing providing the kindergarten, I think it adds value to the entire district. I don't think it just adds value to the 150 kids that are going to be enrolled in the program. I think it adds value to the entire district, and I think when we see a district that values education the way we do, it keeps the home values high, and I feel like that affects the entire town. So I don't think it's just going to service 150 kids.
But in preparing for this, I ran across an article that said, as you increase the level of academic stress on kids, and we have pretty high level now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're gonna, in something like this, kids are gonna be in kindergarten, learn to figure out how to fill in little circles, so they get better at standardized tests, because that's part of the curriculum, right? And so as we increase the pressure, what they found is it increases kids have with ADHD, and so that's one study. But I just look at the pressure our kids are under now and the way they are succeeding, and I just think, all kids need to go to graduate school, they all have to go to, college, but graduate school also, and then I just think, these poor kids, half day, they won't have a choice, or will they be able to go half day?
No, they won't have a choice.
No choice, they just have to all go full time.
But the state standards and the Common Core really, it would really be beneficial to have a full day so that they're learning at a leisurely pace.
I'm sure that people who aren't in kindergarten would set a standard like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, Tom, my kids went to a Montessori school, and my son was actually looking forward to going to kindergarten because he would have a shorter day. Mm-hmm. He was actually going to school longer, and so if we have 3 and 4-year-olds who can do a longer day,
right? No.
Going to full day kindergarten is not a stressor, and they don't take standardized tests until the 3rd grade, so they're not doing those sort of things.
Well,
Time out now.
Yeah.
Give this man a chance to talk.
Okay. Oh, all right, sorry.
It's not a private conversation.
Well, I know this.
Go ahead.
I just have a few questions that I'd like to ask, and I don't know if it's Marie, I guess, or it's the school committee in general, but one thing I have not seen here is the population of students, and certainly over a 3-year trend. What is the population, and what's the trend been? And obviously, I assume you look at cost per student relative to other towns of our desired quality and size, and how we're doing.
Yeah, the population's just under 3,000. It's, Tom did the numbers. I don't want to misspeak. It's been dropping very slightly year to year, but it's been minimal. The projections that we have said that we would be dropping substantially, but that hasn't happened. More people are moving to town.
There are also, I think NESDEC was pretty much, I said this at one of our prior meetings, but for the next 10 years, NESDEC projects us to be level. We're not going to go up, we're not going to go
So
down.
we like 2,900 kids or 2,950 or something like that?
Yeah, so this year, we're 2,882 students. Last year, we were 2,902, and the year before, we were 2,857.
And just to note, Mark, that's our October 1st report to the
Right,
state.
right.
So that's usually published on the DESI's website. You should be able to find that information.
Okay.
That includes preschool also.
And the other thing I just want to, you've got a pie chart here that says budget by location, and the largest piece of this pie says pupil services. Am I decoding that properly when I read that as sped?
Not only, it also includes English language learning and
Psychologists.
psychologists.
I mean, because
But
you know, we're sitting
predominantly
here and I'm listening to everybody debate some amount of money for full-day kindergarten, when the bulk of your money has nothing to do with full-day kindergarten. Because my recollection is that last time I checked this, the number of students engaging in that 1/3 of your costs was a far fewer than 1/3 the number of students. I think I remember something like 10% of the students were in educational services that cost 1/3 of the budget. I don't know if that's
It's more than
still-
10%.
Yeah, I'd say it's
18.
17 or 18% are students with.
It's still disproportionate, and I've heard over and over again discussions, primarily at election time, but when people talk about we need to revise and reform and get a better handle on these costs, and the question is, I think it would be very valuable to the people in town to know what we have done, and I use the we collectively, to get a handle on those costs, because it seems to me that, you know, 1/3 of 60, or $35 million is a boatload of money, and there's a lot of opportunity for being able to fund all the things that the school committee and the select board would like to do by getting a better handle on some of those costs. And I understand that I don't need to go through the state mandated requirements and the individual assessment plans and out of jurisdiction and out of district education. I get all that stuff. But I think if you look at what Long Meadow spends on these services relative to other towns, there may be opportunities, and I'm just saying may. And I would suggest that we ought to focus more on that than on whether or not we do what everybody else in this Commonwealth seems to think is the right thing to do, which is full-day kindergarten, and that's apply our money better, smarter in the areas of special services. And I don't know how to do it. That's not my job.
Mark, we
It's not
have
the
done that.
school.
We've built internal programs. We've saved almost $1 million.
But Marie, with all due respect, you know, you had a great slide presentation about all the successes of the Long Meadow school system, but the people who don't have kids in the school district, they want to know, well, what are you doing effectively financially on that bulk of the money where everybody in election year talks about spend money better. And we never talk about the things that maybe because we can't, because of privacy and that kind of stuff, but we never talk about how we're being more effective and more efficient with that kind of approaches. I hear your comments, and I appreciate the comments, you know, and the 15 slides on SAT scores and everything else. But we're really talking about how we can afford to do all this for the students in town. Remember, 1/3 approximately of households in town have kids in school, and 2/3 don't. So we've got 2/3 of the households approximately supporting the 1/3 of the households that have kids in schools, they're happy to do it as long as their money is well spent. And I think that's the missing link in this presentation, was what have we done to make the money better spent in things like special education. And I really say that with all due respect, because I know you folks have a very, very, very tough job. A couple other things I just wanted to comment on, and I did want to reiterate, I think Stephen pointed out, that, you know, we're talking about a 17% increase in health insurance premiums for all employees in town that are being picked up in the general government side. So your budget does not reflect that 17% of the increase. And so I think people need to understand that. I'm not complaining about it. That's the way we set up our budgeting system. It's probably the right thing to do. But there's a significant increase that is attributable to employees directly relating to teacher services. Similarly, carrying costs and capital costs for projects related to the school systems is also continued on the town side. So when the people in town vote to put up a beautiful high school like this, as we did, they have to realize that the school committee gets to hold the line on the budget, but the town, who's being told we've got to hold the line on our budget, gets hit with those increased costs. And so, Russ, I hear you, and I understand we could, you know, cut a little bit in capital and cut a little bit in this, but the town really is doing the same thing, and I think people need to be aware of that. The last thing I was going to just make a quick comment on is the note that we all believe, or led to believe, that reimbursement from the state will increase approximately $100,000 if we go to all-day kindergarten 1 year hence. I think, A, we need to get a much better handle on that number. B, if we do we look at 2017 and that amount of money, and I'm not sure it's $100,000, maybe it's more, maybe less, as not reoccurring costs. And I say that because of the comments I made about an hour ago about the difference between recurring costs and one-time costs. If it, in fact, in future years it becomes reimbursed, becomes a one-time cost, and we can find ways to fund it in 2017 in another way because it's a one-time cost. We may not necessarily, let's say, fund it out of revenue, out of tax revenue, if it's truly a one-time cost that's going to be reimbursed. That's a bundle of money that helps us in a lot of ways here. And it's that kind of thinking that we've got to start applying to this thing. So I very much appreciate, I know you folks don't have an easy job, but I want you to recognize none of us have an easy job, and to say, gee, we'll cut the capital. You know, I want you to think back to when the roads were a dump, and we have water line breaks all the time, and we have, you know, outfall systems that aren't working, and we need to continue to make some of those investments. I think the investment in our children is outstanding and a smart investment, but so too is the investment in the infrastructure of the town, so that we don't have to find ourselves in other areas. It's a tough balance. That's why we're getting the big bucks.
Mark, to your point on a few things, I think that the full-day kindergarten could potentially help with early intervention, decrease some of those costs that you see in pupil services. So I think that's one attempt that we're making. You know, if we have the students for a full day at the kindergarten level, we can identify things earlier when it's easier to intervene and help their performance later. So I think that's one area that we're trying to improve. I think in terms of whether or not we can afford full-day kindergarten, I'm looking at it kind of on the flip side, in the sense that I don't know if we can afford not to offer it. I think if we're the only town in Western Mass that doesn't offer it, I'm concerned about how that looks to people that are looking to move here. Right now they're looking at our schools, we're doing well. Full-day kindergarten is becoming the standard of education. It's like, you know, before when a high school diploma was enough, and then a college diploma was enough, and now you need a graduate degree. I think full-day kindergarten is just what's happened, and whether or not I agree with it or I don't, it is what it is. So I don't like looking at a map of Western Mass and seeing us as the only town. I think that brings down our property values in some way. You know, on the other side of that, if we have increases in our class sizes because we can't, you know, keep the staff that we have, that stuff goes on the websites that people look at. I looked, you know, when we first got the Williams cuts, I looked at our DESE, you know, Department of Education, Secondary Education report cards, and looked at what the state average was for class sizes at the middle school level. And we're right around the state average, just under it. If we cut those teachers, we'd be above state average. That doesn't look good when people are scouting out where to live. Long Meadow doesn't have a lot of land on our houses. We don't have new homes for people to look at, but East Long Meadow does, and East Long Meadow has free full-day kindergarten, and, if our class sizes go up higher, that concerns me as to what we're going to bring in for our taxes. So while I'm looking at this on the one hand from the school side and what the kids need, I'm also looking at it as a taxpayer, and I'm concerned about what will happen to our property values. So those are a few points I wanted to make that I don't think we're...
While you're looking at that global chart, make sure you see the big star on this for our tax rate, too, because
Well,
we're the number
right.
one in the Commonwealth.
But if we're going to be that way one way or the other, whether we have full-day kindergarten or we have...
No, not necessarily, but I mean, we're number one in a lot of respects.
Right. But, if we don't offer things and we have higher class sizes and a highest tax rate in the area, then people aren't going to stop wanting to move here.
I've had one question, I can't get an answer on that. I've heard different figures. How many kindergarten students do we have?
We have right now about 140.
No, it's a little higher. I think
Is it?
154, around, about 154 this year.
Close enough.
Somewhere between 140 and 156.
And I think, Mark, that's the thing that's leaving that number that you were talking about, the $100,000. Tom, you can probably speak to that better. That's why we don't know what that is, because it's...
But Michelle, we know a minimum. It's, there's some minimum it's going to be. Take the smallest number. Look at what the state's saying, and if in fact it's only $82,000, that, minimum we're going to get reimbursed, that's $82,000 that will not be recurring costs.
Well,
that's my point.
But it's retroactive, so however many students we have...
But we need to lay it out in 2017, but we don't need to lay it out in 2018, so therefore 2017, we can use a revenue source that's not reoccurring.
Right.
Like free cash.
Right.
Like stabilization.
Exactly.
So my point is
Okay.
that puts relief on our budget, if you will,
Yeah.
to some degree. I'm arguing in favor of finding an alternate revenue source for whatever's going to be reimbursed the following year to ease the problem.
Got it, okay.
What I'm trying to say here is full-day kindergarten isn't the problem. For what I see is to be the issue of why the school department budget is what it is. It's my opinion, and I'm doing it from afar. I have no depth like you do, but I'll tell you one of the things, and if I could just Russ a second, you talk about FY16 revised budget, and I had this discussion with Paul and Stephen about our revenue is never exactly what we plan it is. Neither is the school department's revenue, and if you look back at what the budget was that was approved at the May 2015 town meeting, the revenue for the school department actually went up relative to what was assumed at that time, and expenses went up similarly. And so the question is, just like we talked about the town looking at potential revenue different from what our conservative plan is, what's the school committee going to do if, as it follows, at least the 7 years I've been on the select board, the actual revenue comes in above our conservative plan? Can that money then go to offset some of these other expenses so that we don't end up closing tennis courts or something to have to do with the town in order to fund something which doesn't need to be funded because we're going to get the added revenue?
Let me go back to my question. Nobody's going to answer.
How many kids in kindergarten?
Yeah, we got 156
I
children.
think they gave you some numbers.
Yeah, but that was the first part.
Okay.
Sorry.
I've been patient. Let me talk a minute. How many students do we currently have enrolled in full-day kindergarten?
In full-day kindergarten, well, I believe we would, again, haven't run the report in the last couple weeks. I believe we have 14 kids enrolled in the half-day program. So assuming Diane's number is correct of 156, that would leave us with 142 kids enrolled in full-day kindergarten this year.
So then we're looking at picking up 12 children that are not already in full-day kindergarten at this time. We have 12 that aren't in.
Again, our kindergarten enrollment fluctuates from year to year.
14.
14.
Well, that's not including kids that go to private school for kindergarten.
Yeah, I'm basing it on kids enrolled right now.
Anyway.
But they'll be here in first grade.
Not necessarily.
Some of them.
Yeah, they're going to stay in private schools too. Okay, but right now, I guess we're at the current figure, so we're talking 14 people. Okay, good. Now, let the games begin.
There's no games, I mean.
No, I didn't mean
The
it.
question that arises is, if we've already got 142 kids in full-day kindergarten, then is there going to be a significant staff change to go from 142 to 156? Or is it just that what you're gonna lose is tuition revenue, and we gotta make up the tuition revenue?
Yeah, if I could. Understanding currently the way our FY16 budget is designed, we have 9 full-day kindergarten sections across the 3 elementary schools, 3 at each school. We have an additional half-day section at Center, which encompasses those 14 students. Kids from the town could go to the half-day program no matter what district they lived in, if they so choose. So in FY17's budget, we kept the 9 sections with the expectation that the center school enrollment, which is where a majority of those half-day students are coming from, that district, that they would be able to fit into the capacity that we have at Center. So we don't, at this point, and we have about 148 kids as of February 23rd enrolled for kindergarten next year. So we don't anticipate a need to add another section at any of the 3 elementary schools, which is why there's no staffing changes except the reduction of the half-day program, which is why we're cutting the .5 teacher and the .5 aide, which is just that half-day section, which will get absorbed into the existing capacity.
And with 142 kids in kindergarten, there weren't less this year, times $2,500 per?
$2,750.
$2,750?
Yeah.
And that's the reduced revenue, give or
Correct.
take, for next year?
Give or take, correct.
And then to answer your other question, though, we've had about 150 kids in kindergarten for a while. So
Yeah.
with that number, it's around 100 grand.
Correct.
So the number would be 250.
Stephen, you keep raising your hand. You have something?
Well, I wanted to kind of tie the 2 budgets back together for a little bit.
Okay, well, hold on one second and hold your thought. Does anybody have anything current to the current discussion?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, I do, so.
Go ahead.
I was very sympathetic to all-day free kindergarten until I got the word the end of last week where we got hit with 17.5%. Maybe we're going to be lucky and it's going to come down, but that is a huge number. That is an obligation like you were looking at, the obligation on your first 4 items. So we might need to look at, and then we just begin to look at it and we're going to pull the things together, we might need to look at a phased for this year. And look at maybe all-day free next year, maybe this year go down to 100, find some way that we can fill that gap. Because I hope our $600,000 hit is not going to come true, but if it's true, that's really concerning, how we're going to make that work. Because the town side is just cutting it down as much as we're dropping everywhere but public safety. The one thing that I know everyone says is it's going to affect and make changes in the program needs going forward. So I was wondering, does it now look at changing the program needs of that elementary school math program? Is that still going to be needed? Or is that something you're going to look and see if its effectiveness in the next few years as the kindergarten rolls out and we are able to offer full-day kindergarten to everybody? Is there any way that you go back and look at the need or effectiveness of programs that you've put in the
Absolutely.
future?
We're assessing staff development, we're looking at achievement, we look at that annually. But when you make such a huge investment, there was a math committee that looked at that. They did a year-long study before selecting the program. Usually a new program is here to stay at least a good 5 years. But there's ongoing, and then when you get to 4 or 5 years, you have another committee, you look at that, you assess it, and talk about a new program.
But the all-day kindergarten should really make a difference in those math scores also. So is there any way of assessing which made it? That's program or the kindergarten? There's no answer to that, but it's something that probably should be looked at in the future, because what we're reaching here is what we're reaching in the town. We have to find a new way of delivering the services. Because I know you said OPEB, no one's doing it, but I consider it almost a moral obligation, because we're making promises to all these teachers and unions that we're going to pay for your retirement for the rest of your lives, your retirement health insurance. And right now, we really can't do that. Every year, we're looking to see how we're doing it. And other towns are upside down, and we see we're gonna be upside down. And when I say upside down, I mean more retirees than employees. And so when we put that money away, we're looking when it's gonna start eating in our operation budget. And to this year, and what happened this end of last week, where we got hit with the 17.5%, that just might show we don't know what's happening, not just in 10 years, but maybe 2 years, 3 years. We were really lucky with Scantic Valley. They took their savings and they subsidized us down to zero and really no numbers. But the healthcare is just exploding, and that is the retirees, and we are self-funded for those retirees too. So we're all sort of in the same boat, and that's why I keep saying, well, did you add a new teacher? Because that's someone who's going to retire in the future, and they're going to come and look at us. And I had a very scary experience, and that was attending a state force labor union meeting, and they were talking about what happened in Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, towns went broke, and the first thing that went out is people were not getting pensions, fire people, police. They did not get their pensions. They did not get their retirement funding for their health care. They were cut out. And they said, where were the elected officials to allow this to happen?
Because it's not contractual, it's a promise, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a promise. So we're the elected officials, and, you know, we're putting this money away, and everyone says, well, you're never going to make the 21 million. Yeah, but we're going to make it to those people we're making the promises to. So we're all sort of in the same boat, and we're all heading towards the same way, which is we got to change the way we deliver services. I like all-day kindergarten. I just, after Wednesday, we'll have a better idea of where the money is, and that's only my concern. And we probably have to, and I think we're starting the discussion on how we're going to change the way we're doing services. But that's sort of where I'm coming from it. Hopefully we can play with the numbers.
Can I just?
So, I think it's useful, because I don't think it's quite come up, why we have a half-day program. I mean, some of it is because we want it, but the more basic point is we can't force people to pay for public education. So we have to, because there are some people who either can't or won't pay. So we have to offer this half-day kindergarten. So we have a half-day program for people who can or won't pay. And they're receiving a different education. And so that kind of gets back to Russ's question, is this part of a public education? It's part of the Massachusetts Constitution that we give a free public education. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear at this point, full-day kindergarten is part of a public education. And the question is, are we going to have a two-tiered system? And, you know, based on ability to pay. I think if we were in a different town, let's say we were in Springfield, and there were racial correlations between ability to pay and who's getting and not getting full-day kindergarten, you couldn't stand for a minute. Now, I don't know, there may or may not be racial correlations here in Longmeadow, but there certainly is a correlation between the education somebody's getting and their ability to pay. I mention that because, you know, I know growing up that had my parents been forced to pay anything like this, I wouldn't have been going to full-day kindergarten. I would have been getting a different education than the other kids. And that's fundamentally not what our town is about. Now, the good news is the state makes this choice easy for us. We get this $100,000 match. I mean, when I think about the Community Preservation Act funds, I think that we're down to like an 18% match. This is a better match than that. And that's not even taking into account the return on investment that we get, even if we didn't get the match, through you know, lower education costs down the line. So, I mean, this is really a no-brainer. And, you know, I think, you know, when we get right down to it, you know, if we come to the point where our board and the school committee in good faith are split on that question, is it part of a public education? which we have to offer for free? Are we split on whether we want to have a two-tiered education system? Then I think the people at town meeting deserve to vote on that.
The people at town meeting are going to vote on this budget anyway. One closing statement, and I'll give it to you, Stephen. And I hear what you're saying, Alex, and you can't disagree with anything we've said in the room, but you still have to acknowledge the fact that the state has not mandated full-day kindergarten yet. If they had, this wouldn't be a discussion in this room. And you know that as well as I do. And we're not the only community in the Commonwealth that has tuition-based. So it's just, I wish the thing wasn't here either, but it's here, so we have to deal with it. We're dealing with colliding problems on budgetary, and I think everybody's been hearing them tonight. I hope everybody's paying attention to listen to what's being said up here. We're not blowing smoke. Everything's being said is true. Stephen?
Yeah.
Can I just, Richard, can I make one quick point?
Yeah, and then we'll let Stephen wrap.
I loved the idea of phasing in, and that made a lot of sense to me. The only issue with that is that we don't get that money back from the state. So we get nothing if we cut the tuition in half. We only get that $100,000 if we go in. So it's kind of like, we're saving, but we're missing out on free, not free money, but,
That's good to know.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks. I just want to tie together a couple of concepts and get back to kind of the brass tacks of the budgets. And first concept is from the past. And I think that the discussion about full-day kindergarten, in principle, I agree with. I don't think anybody here, as you had said, Richard, disagrees in principle with it. But some time ago, policymakers in this community made a decision to have tuition. And now, and just like some time ago, policymakers made the decision to not build a new DPW facility or build a new senior center or do any number of things that now we feel we must do or really should do. And the discussion we're really having about the budget is what is the cost to now to undo or redo those policy decisions made years ago in this community, and what can we afford and what are we going to give up to make those decisions? And that's a perfectly natural course of business. But it is a discussion about what decisions were made by past elected bodies and town meeting, and what does it cost us to change those decisions today. So that's the part about the past. And again, it's not just kindergarten. It's kindergarten class size, like I said, you could throw a rock on the budget documents or put your finger down on a line item and figure out something that had happened in the past. So that's really, for me, Mark talked about, not political and management, that's how I look at it. What do we need to do to undo those decisions if the policymakers now feel that that's the thing to do? Because we are talking about money. We are talking about a fixed sum of money, and all the discussions about quality of life, property values, everything else, there's a flip side to that. And so one of the other concepts I want to bring in, two words. One is balance, and that is we are a full-service community, and I think that Long Meadow has a nicely balanced suite of services that appeal to the 3,000 students and the 12,000 other people, or the 5,800 households in total, and the 1/3 of those households that have students. And, I think when we look at core services and what impacts people's quality of life, if you are a parent of school-aged children like me, and my kids are in the schools, and they benefit tremendously from their experience in Long Meadow School, so it's obviously not in my best interest to do things that would harm the school district. But if you're those kids, or if you're those families, counseling on aging doesn't look like a core service. But if you're a senior, the Council on Aging is a pretty core service to you, and free full-day kindergarten really isn't on your radar screen. And so the budget that we presented is really our best attempt, or my best attempt, I guess, to present something that is balanced, taking into consideration all of those needs, not an attempt to not allow the schools to do what they need to do. And the other concept then is this concept of obligation. And Jan was talking about the pressures on the budget based on obligations. And I think as we move forward to the process, I would just talk to the select board about, or ask the school committee for further information about this concept of obligation, because cost of living increases are cost, this 388,000 cost of living increases. And much of that is contractually obligated. Some of it may not be. And I only pick out COLAs because it's at the top of that list. But there are expenses in here, in these budget items from the school district, just like there are in the ones from the general government side that I presented, that are obligations. Some within that total aren't necessarily obligatory, and because now we have an issue where we are over, where we stand today, when you combine the two documents, is we are over what we can afford. Where are the true obligations, and what are the cost of true obligations, and what things are flexible? I think you've heard, the select board's heard me talk about the budget annually is an exercise in sorting out what is fixed and what is flexible. And most of it is fixed, quite honestly. And so where are the flexibilities in the budget? I would just note that I'm proud of the budget that we worked on to submit, and shown that our departments, like I said, the town side operating budgets are $76,000 less than they were last year. And it's not because our scope of services went down or our costs went down, but we understood the pressure that was on all sides. We've been working very well with the schools, the school district, and the chair, and so it's not an issue of, we're just going to start, trying to some kind of end game. We've worked very well together, so everyone understood. We started back in October at a joint meeting just like this, talking about the budget. I think even on that day, everyone knew we were heading for this moment. And so I think looking forward, as we consider the budget on both groups, I would just ask that we bear in mind that concept, the two concepts of balance and obligation, because somewhere in those two concepts, there's going to have to be some give to get to a town meeting, to present town meeting with a balanced budget that makes sense for the entire community.
Janet or Marie or Tom, do any of you have a wrap-up? Anything you'd like to say on a wrap-up? Russ?
Can I just say, so I think Mr. Crane's right on. What this really comes down to is policy decisions. It's really we've come up with, we think kindergarten is important, and we really want those middle school teachers to remain a team at Williams and Glenbrook. And then I think you have OPEB and capital, and that's a policy decision. Whether we can try to meld those two together, I don't know. I would never ask you to take capital from the $1.4 million you spent last year and reduce it to nothing. I think what we're really saying is just don't increase it this year. Let us get this into place so it's part of our program. And then it's part of the program. It's something just like music. When I say I don't want to cut music, I don't want to cut the teams. At some point, we're just going to be cutting staff because, and I don't think it's special ed that's inefficient, by the way. I think we're level 1 and level 2 schools because we keep all groups scoring well enough to stay in those two levels. If we don't spend enough on special ed and we become level 3 or level 4, we won't get people moving here. I mean, people move here, at least younger people, because of level 1 and level 2 schools. So I think the inefficiency is the fact we have 2 middle schools and 3 elementary schools. So if we're not going to do something about that, the only thing on our side we can do, really, is look at cutting people, like the middle school team, music, it's programs. Because there isn't really something that we can look at and say, what's the efficiency we can fix, other than having a lot of buildings, which nobody wants to change that either.
But Russ, you don't pay for the buildings. The number of buildings doesn't impact but you don't pay for the heat, you don't pay for the maintenance, and you don't, out of your budget, when I say you, the school committee obviously pays for 2 principals and pays for 2 vice principals.
That's right.
But that's the way, that's why I look at this and say, there's got to be other ways of bringing efficiency into the school budget, because, I think we pointed out, Stephen was exactly right, that it is choices, it was policies, and who gets to pay to revise the policies. And what I'm hearing is, the general government gets to pay to revise this community policy. And I haven't heard anybody say that it's a shared responsibility to revise this community policy. And I haven't once sat here and won't sit here and say, I don't support the full-day kindergarten. I think it's important. People have put in a good argument for it. What I'm saying is that we're focused on the wrong, on one item when we should be focusing on the entire thing. And we're saying, general government, you've got to make up and one time only give us this extra couple $100,000 by holding the line, which is effectively reducing under inflationary pressures our expenses on capital, or hold the line on OPEB, when in fact if we had an OPEB, if we were even just funding current people, $1.5 million in our budget is paying for medical benefits for people who haven't worked here for quite some time. I mean, just think about that. If we had a funded OPEB plan, we'd have $1.5 million more to go with it. So my point, Russ, isn't to argue that we need to do it. It truly is a shared responsibility, you know, and everybody's got to take it on. And what I've seen is a budget that comes back, you know, that says town side, and you look, the general government, as Stephen said, cut our expenditures on that side, 79, 80,000. That's pretty flat. Okay, that's not bad when you think of the increases everywhere. We're in benefits for all the employees. The increased capital we're spending for projects we need to benefit the town. So I'm not arguing that it's not right. I'm just saying that who gets to share it? And I think it's going to come down to we all are going to need to share it. And I'm trying to sit here and offer suggestions on how we do that and say things like, have you looked at potential increases in revenue that are going to come after the budget? Have you looked at thinking of that $100,000 as a one-time expenditure or whatever it is, so that we can come up with better answers? I'm not throwing it one way or the other.
And I wish we had done this process differently, because, I mean, that's how we cut the $646,000 from our budget in other areas, to try and come to you with something that wasn't totally outrageous in our minds, at least. So I kind of wish we had this meeting before we had our vote, and you know, you and I talked about that a little bit, because this is kind of a backwards process. So all the things that we did to try and get where we are now, you haven't really heard about, and that's unfortunate. But we have, you know, we tried to make the cuts that we thought we could. We ended up with the three things left. It was music, Williams Middle School, and kindergarten. I mean, those are the three things, and as a committee member, it's tough to cut any of those three, really. I mean, one is new, but the other two would be cutting what we have now. But we did try, and I think we could talk about that more, probably not in the middle of this meeting right now, but there were a lot of things that we tried to cut from the budget to get to where we are now.
Yeah, but Russ, for you to come back and say cut capital is like me going to you and say cut such and such. Because I'm going to tell you that for me, capital is more important than some other service that somebody may like.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm reluctant to throw out things because people jump on them. But
in this process,
but the issue is, you know, we're trying to balance the entire general government side. You know, and I understand why capital looks like, gee, we can cut it once and it's fine. But I've been there. I was chairman of the capital planning committee when we had $35,000 a year to spend. We had nothing, and the town was falling apart, literally falling apart. And what we chose to spend our money on was replacing all the windows with energy efficient windows in a high school that's now rubble. So, go figure, you know?
Well, the town did ask us to make cuts, by the way, which we put into this.
Right.
I mean, some of this is directed by the town, actually.
So Mark, I do just want to say, you know, the point of us coming is in collaboration. We do know, you know, we all live here, you know, we all pay taxes here, and it is collaborative. We wanted this to be an educational, informational piece, because clearly, you know, you have a large part, you know, you've got a lot of work ahead of you with the budget. We've finished that, you know, we've finished our work of it, but still are going to need to be making tweaks and adjustments here and there. But, you know, to give you an explanation of the why and to answer the questions for you. And quite frankly, your audience is very different than the audience who watches our meetings. So we wanted to reach as broad a group as possible. I don't think the school committee as a whole, I know Russ is not speaking for me, the school committee has not taken a position on asking the select board to make any changes in their policies or reductions. The purpose of us coming was to explain why we voted the budget we did and why our budget was $300,000 over the, I don't want to use allotted, but projected allotment that was given in our budget directive. So it's not that we aren't all concerned and aren't all you know, willing to continue to sit down and roll up our sleeves and work together. I just wanted to make that clear, because school committee did not vote or did not, you know, address taking a stand on asking for specific numbers or policies to be addressed. So I would like that just to be clarified.
And Janet, you know, I do take you at your, actually I take everybody at their word that you guys did make painful decisions. I mean, I'm struck in particular that we don't have health education in 5th grade, you know? I mean, what is it, in 1 or 2 days, we're gonna have a big opioid presentation. You know, yay for us, right? We're coming to grips with this major problem. Well, I'll tell you, Ruth Potee, who you had here, what she says is, it's really expensive to get people off drugs. It's really cheap to give them education, to tell them not to get on drugs in the first place. So, I mean, you know, I went to public schools in Maine. I mean, we didn't even have money enough for football. We didn't have money for hockey. I mean, like, you know, this was a whole different level than Longmeadow. But you know what? We had a health teacher in elementary school. And the fact that we don't have that, I think, is testament to just how difficult the decisions you've had to make are. I mean, it was up to me. I'd find a way to find that $25,000. Actually, I might still make that motion at some point because it's such a, to me, that is such a no-brainer. The payoff is so huge to our community. So I take you at your word that you've made difficult decisions.
By the way, it's tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the symposium. Thank you for the PSA on that.
Right.
Okay, any other comments before we separate the waters? Marie, nothing?
No, I appreciate everyone's input and thoughts. I know that you've been supportive of us, and this is going to be a difficult process to work through, so thank you.
I agree. I think it's been a very successful meeting. There's been a lot of information exchange, and we don't have to finalize, I think the 21st of this month when we finally vote on the budget and set the warrant and all that, so there's going to be a lot of talk between now and then. And we have a lot of
you have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of meetings to go through, and as I say, it's an open dialogue. I talked with Russ about the process. I've talked with Janet about the process. Seems to be a little confused, but maybe next year it can be better, and maybe we need to set a different guideline on how we'd all come together on the whole process. I understand we have different audiences, but maybe we can make the audiences understand how we deal with it. So I appreciate you guys coming in tonight.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you
understand
for
we have
having us.
another meeting.
Thank you,
so-
Yeah, we have to continue our meeting.
Okay, and we're going to continue just for a little bit, but thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We guess
No, we're going
we guess
to-
set the schedule and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're about to schedule, and then we'll adjourn. While they're clearing out, I guess I can continue talking, there's not that much noise. We had got with the members on the select board, and we understood the 29th was going to be the delivery of the budget. And then normally, we set up about 4 different meetings after that to talk about the budget as a select board before we do the final warrant, before we vote it in. And we started looking at the dates, and we got some, we could only get a couple of people in at the times when we needed them, and we need a quorum. So I went ahead today and I sent out, or not today, I sent out last week and got another schedule of meetings going. And what we want to talk about, we have 2 approaches we can take. Right now, I currently have meetings set up on the 2nd, the 4th, and the 9th. We can keep those meetings and go into our budget discussion, or we can take the later part of the month just prior to the 21st. I think there's 3 days back there, like the 15th, 16th, and 17th. Maybe the 15th's out. It's the 14th, 16th, and 17th, I think. We've also got 3 days when it looks like almost everybody's available. So we could do it then if we wanted to let a little time go between now and then. And I had to make these meetings because if we're going to meet on the 2nd, Debbie had to get it posted today. That's the reason I jumped ahead with those. But I did want to chat with the board and say, what's your feelings collectively? We've already pledged that we're available at these two periods of time. Yeah.
I think you got the dates wrong, not the 14th, not available.
You're not available on the 14th. The 14th is a public meeting, excuse me.
Oh, it's the public meeting.
That's the
Okay.
public meeting date.
All right.
That's the budget forum?
Yeah, the budget forum.
Okay.
Yeah. It was, I didn't bring my sheet with me, Marie, 17th, 18th, 19th, or something. There was
Yeah.
3 dates.
The rest of those are fine.
Yes. Excuse me. That week of the 14th, it was, I think, the 16th, 17th. Could have been the 15th as well.
The 15th is not.
No, it's not the
15th's not.
Tuesday, that's a
That's
Tuesday.
good, that's a very special day.
Right.
Must be a birthday.
Yeah, the 15th was not available, but anyway, there is 2 periods, and it depends on the flavor of the board, whether you want to roll into this now, or whether you want to set back and maybe get some questions to Stephen, or get some questions to the schools for a little bit more background before we get to chatting.
I think we should roll into it in case we need more time later.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think it does make sense. I mean, I don't mind getting into it, but maybe to have the meetings later on, because it maybe gives us a chance to digest the information and, like, he's gonna print out Stephen's gonna print out the budget. I remember when we had the full GFOA thing, I mean, I spent a lot of time going through that, reading it over. So, maybe we could have, a meeting or 2 this week, but then have 1 or 2 later on.
Okay, well, we currently have them set up for the 2nd, the 4th, and the 9th, and plus the fact we have our regular meeting on the 7th. So that's a regular meeting on the 7th.
And right now, we're looking at a is it $300,000 or $380,000 difference between the two? So we've got to, they said they want to have some dialogue back and forth, so I hate to have us wait all the way, because if our public meeting's the 15th, we really have to have it set
Yeah, that's good.
before the
That's-
15th.
that's
And
a
I would
good
think
point.
those later dates are just protecting us, 14th.
The 14th is the Monday,
Yeah.
and then Mark and Alex were available on the 16th, 17th, 18th.
Right, yeah, I'd forgot about that, Marie. It might be nice if we had everything nailed down for the public meeting. I really had forgot about that.
I mean, do we have to have the forum on the 14th?
It was the original date that it's scheduled
Or if we
in.
move that to the 16th or 17th and put our,
That's wide open. Yeah, we can
I
move
would
it.
advise the 17th.
you're right, I wouldn't advise it.
Well, you might get a lot of
No, this isn't-
interested people showing up.
Too, so I mean,
No, but this isn't South Boston,
Yeah.
yeah, it is wherever I am.
Is that what everybody like to do, is go ahead and kick that down the road, the public hearing?
Yeah, then I'll
Yeah.
be there.
Yeah, you'll be there, because Marie was going to miss the public hearing.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, I guess you and I'll look tomorrow at the 17th, whatever.
No,
Whatever-
he's saying 16th.
Yeah, that week, later that week.
Yeah, because 2 days doesn't make
Yeah,
much
it
difference.
doesn't make any difference. The only thing I'd say is, and then that would, let's just say, I guess school committee a chance to attend, but they don't have their meeting on Monday anyway. The one thing I'd like to nail down is the next, say, 3 meetings, and what I'd like to do is try and schedule, as best as possible, what departments' budgets you're going to want to discuss on which night. I would not like to have all of our departments sitting here for all of the nights. I tried to, I
Right.
think we did it last year and it worked out pretty well, where we said, on this night, we're gonna do public works, so I can have the team from public works there. This night, we're gonna do public safety, and similarly, so, say Paul Healy for $185,000 isn't sitting here, 4 nights out of the week.
Right.
So I'd like to ask for that anyway. We don't need to have that answer tonight, but as we go through,
Well, we got them all sitting here. It's a nice time to at least talk about it.
As far as I'm concerned, it's somewhat arbitrary, and I think we ought to set it up with their schedules too. I mean, I don't care if I talk to DPW first or,
Well, first of all, do we want to talk to all the
Yeah, that's
divisions?
right. Do we want to talk to
Do
everybody?
you have a need?
Yeah.
Well,
DPW,
I mean-
public safety, I could see, but everybody else, I don't know. We could think about it.
I mean, do you need to talk to Council on Aging?
Let's do this. You guys just got the information on Friday. Why don't we take at least a couple of days to
Okay.
go through it? And if each of you wants to, and if only one member wants to hear from a department, that's good enough for me to invite them here. So it doesn't have to be consensus that we need to talk to Barry Jarvis from Parks and Rec. If one of you says, I have questions about the Parks and Rec budget, then she can be here. But we don't have to answer the question today, but just within the next few days to let them schedule their time as well. I've told them all to plan on being here sometime over the next 2 weeks, so they have some expectation that they're gonna be obligated. It's mostly just giving them as much notice as possible.
Okay, so we actually have we could have a total of 4 meetings before the public meeting then.
I don't know how.
2, 4, and 9, and the 7th.
Okay.
And I think we're all available. There's only one meeting, Alex, that you're not available for.
2, 4, 9, and
There was just
14.
one night we didn't have a full
We have a regular
quorum.
meeting on the 7th.
We have a regular
Yeah,
meeting on the
but
7th.
we could meet on the budget on 2, 4, 9, and 14.
Do we have to vote
we don't
before
need
to
to do
public
it.
forum?
Well, that's the 14th is before the public forum.
Okay, so then you'll be voting without me. It'd be a,
We don't
Not
have
a
to
full
vote, we
board.
don't have to, you're not going to vote on it for a public
Yeah,
forum.
we're not going to approve the budget before
that's
the
what I
public
was saying.
forum.
You
Right.
you don't do that before.
No, we got to approve it by the 21st.
See what I'm saying, or
Tw-
the last possible date of
21st is when we have to set the budget.
Okay.
the warrant.
Yeah, the warrant and approve
All in the
everything.
budget same night.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a regular meeting.
Right. So you want to,
Versus a regular meeting.
do you want to go ahead and add the 14th to the active schedule now then?
Yeah.
I'd add the 14th and the 18th.
Okay, well, Debbie, why don't you follow up on those and add the 14th and 18th?
And the 16th is the public forum? Yeah.
Well, we need to have all of our session left before we have public forum. And I can't imagine we can't wrap this thing up in that amount of meetings. Can you, Mark? I mean, that, and add, you got the 7th in there too.
Well, don't we have a regular agenda?
He
though, for
wants
the
the
7th?
Yeah, we
18th for an
do,
actual
we do.
meeting.
We're going to still slice an hour or 2 hours away for budget too. Unless the thing collapses on us.
If it's me, I'd do set 3 days of the 4th, the 9th, and the 14th to talk about it before the public forum, and then set the 18th to vote.
Friday night, not Monday. Can it be
Is
Monday?
the 18th, is the 18th of Friday night?
18th's a Friday.
You can do the 17th. I was,
Fine, do it the 17th.
what about
Yeah.
the 16th, Wednesday the 16th? Everyone's available then.
So everybody was available, I think, on the 16th.
Yeah, we'll do it the 16th then.
They just weren't available on the 15th.
I'll put a hold
I
on the
thought the
16th as well.
16th was going to be the public forum. I just wanted a date after the forum to vote on it.
The 21st.
Yeah, we can vote on it the 21st.
Oh, okay, then we don't need a date after the 16th.
No.
We don't need the 17th or 18th then.
Okay, so
Anyway, but we can vote on the 21st.
we'll go ahead and set the 14th and 16th up then. And if we don't need them, we'll just cancel.
How about the 4th and or 9th?
I got the 2nd, 4th, and 9th are already set.
And are
So
we
we'll
getting
be
the
back
GFOA
Yeah, on the 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be
in
distributing-
electronic
we'll be-
little sticks?
we'll
Is
be
that what you're gonna do?
distributing a electronic version.
Yeah.
Do you want a printed version, Alex, or electronic?
Printed.
GFOA.
Yeah, printed, please.
Okay, so one printed version.
So we're
GFOA.
moving all these dates.
No, it'll be in draft
The
form.
2nd, the 4th.
Yes, I understand.
That's our regular meeting.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't
9th, the
finalize
14th,
last
and
town
the
meeting.
16th.
Right.
Yeah, 2, 7, 4, 9, 14.
No, that's what you did 2 years
16,
ago.
yeah. And then we got one on the
Yeah.
21st, but that's a regular
Basically, the
meeting.
first section
And we may not need them, Tom. Okay, I guess at this point right now, if anybody has any questions or thoughts, I mean, start kicking them to Stephen via email so he can start generating some answers.
Yeah, and certainly if you wanted to have either a face-to-face or a conference call with Paul and I to go through things in greater detail, we're certainly open to that too.
Why don't we?
I mean, sorry, Richard, the reason I say that is because as we even discovered tonight, there are certain things, you want to get into some level of depth that maybe is not, or, you can chew up a lot of airtime, if you will, getting
Right.
into some stuff that may be somewhat minutia. So if you want to get to some of that level of depth offline with us, and then we can discuss it again, obviously, during our meetings, that's fine too.
Why don't you get one of your division chiefs in on the 2nd?
On the 2nd.
Yeah, bring any one of them in, or bring two, however you feel.
Okay.
How about, would it take us that long to go through public safety, the police and fire?
I would do that in a day, easily.
So maybe you can kick both of them in. And John lives in town, so it'd be easy on him. And we just get them both out of the way that night.
The only thing is that I did prep him that he'll need to be, explain the vehicles again. And I'll make sure that he's ready that. If he's not, maybe the thing to do is to bring in Public Works. Because it's their first, everyone heavily involved in the budget is their first time being involved in the budget. And so maybe have them first, and if they need to go back to the drawing board on some items, they'll learn that on the 2nd, and then they can come back potentially the following week. I mean,
Well,
I have Friday night
why don't we
in my
leave it up,
test
hey,
department coming
leave it
up.
up to you. But have one of your divisions, one or two divisions represented on the 2nd.
Will do.
And guys, get ready, and let us know as soon as you can who it's gonna be.
Yep.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I'm still stymied as the process relative to the school committee, and only because there's a clear difference between what we would have liked them to ask for and what they've put in their budget. And, you know, I don't want to get to the point where, you know, it's an impasse is a nice way to put it. So at what point do we circle back with the school committee saying, you know, what could you do? I mean, we haven't heard any comment of, you know, this is a preliminary budget, or they're willing to look at it again. What we heard is, this is our budget, we approved it, we went to forms, and they're done. And
Well, that's
if they're
basically-
done, then we got problems.
No,
But I don't
that's-
think
that's not
that's
what they
what
were
Janet's,
saying,
I don't
yeah.
think so either.
And I think so if we put a motion, let's say whether it's the second or fourth, we put a motion that this is what we're doing and moving our budget and asking, so I think that's something that it'll evolve through the meetings.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did talk in the preliminary meetings that Stephen and I had, and Paul, there was discussion about phasing, and they didn't pick up on it.
I mean, I think the bottom, in all candor, I think, Mark, you're already visualizing what the department meeting is gonna look like, and it's gonna look like, okay, so now you've given $30,000 in your department already from last year. You know, what 3 positions are you gonna cut so we can afford the school department's budget? I mean, when you're talking the general government side of the ledger, that's essentially the next phase of the conversation. Or you could take out the police vehicle, that's $35,000, and then it's the other discussion. Then of course is your own policies.
Right.
What do you want to do about those? That's truthfully the biggest discussion. That probably should be on the second, because that's
Yeah.
going to drive the cost curve and everything else. There really is not a lot of room on the other budgets unless you just tell me 10% off the top, and then I go back and start doing, and we go back and start doing that. It's the policy discussion that probably should start on March 2nd. But the one department that is gonna have the most impact on getting the town meeting with a balanced budget just left the room. And we didn't get anywhere. And I should say we didn't get anywhere. I agree with you, Richard, it was a positive
Right.
meeting. I think we understand each other well. I think there was absolute sincerity on all sides to try and do the right thing. I don't feel like either side was trying to, you know, line up for a town meeting showdown or anything else. I think we're all sincere in trying to solve the problem, but, you know, their budget, even with their cuts, still went up $500,000.
Well, and I'm a little bit confused, I'm not confused. I was surprised to find out that we only have 14 students that aren't involved in full-day kindergarten. I thought it'd be far more than that.
Right. The issue isn't the students or the education,
Right.
the issue is the $2,750.
yeah.
Right, because there's, I was...
$2,750 per family.
Now, am I right, though, that if there are a lot of students that do get full-day kindergarten state-sponsored?
No.
Because of their,
No.
because of their academics?
No, none.
What do you mean by state sponsored?
Oh, no, aren't there eligibility guidelines where they're funded full?
Well, they offer a scholarship, I know, to some people.
Yeah.
That's
Partial
offered.
scholarship.
Yeah,
Yeah, they probably offer some type of tuition.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, and the funding formulas, to Alex's point earlier about Springfield, and if there was divisions along which the kindergarten thing broke down, in the urban areas, they get a lot of money from state because of the formulas that are based on poverty and
Yeah.
Well, Springfield gets 50% of
ESL
their
and
budget
everything
from the
else.
state.
So that's one of the reasons why it's a problem of blessings, but Long Meadow doesn't fare well on those formula funds because of the incomes that people have in the community, the
Right.
demographics of the community. I mean, so we bear it all ourselves.
Because I would think if the argument is that we need to have full-day kindergarten, so every child in our town meets their full potential, and you're talking about 14 kids, you would think the Leaf Foundation could just give a scholarship for those 14 kids, and we'd be flush. Every kid would be getting full-time kindergarten. But it's about the money,
Yeah.
it's not about that. But I just think that, Alex, your comment about your son saying, he was excited about going to kindergarten because it was gonna be less time in school. And I just think that not all children need a full-day program, and that there are some children that need that bonding with their parents, and it kind of disturbs me that there would be no option for part-time. I know I stand alone on this.
No, I don't think you stand
But I think
alone.
that there's no option for kids to have a half-day program, and if it becomes a truancy issue, if children aren't sent in for a full day, I just,
Well, take the-
personally,
No,
I just have
I think
an
that
issue.
you're not alone on it. I just,
Yeah.
that's their battle.
Yeah.
And our battle is how we're gonna pay for it.
Right.
Well, take the flip side. There's a lot of parents that are homeschooling.
Well, yeah, they could always have that option.
I mean, you know, and then what they homeschool, sometimes, I know one family homeschools 6 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how she does it, but it's 6 children.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. I'd rather send them to school.
Same amount of work as doing
Yeah.
one kid, right?
That's right.
But,
She's crushing us in class size.
yeah, she crushes class size.
I'm sending my kids to that house.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I still think that we've got to look at things like, you know, and I just threw out here, this whole idea of, is that $100,000 or whatever it is that's going to be reimbursed the second year, something we're willing to look at for funding in an alternate way? And Stephen, I don't know what that means, to tell you the truth, of where that money might be, but if it really isn't a reoccurring cost, because it's a startup cost, if you will, you know, do we want to look at that and say, okay, we got $100,000 of that problem that we can handle some other way? It's not free.
So
We
but still not only 208.
well,
Yeah.
and we still got to come up with money, but we didn't have to cut anybody's budget to do it. We just have to fund it some other way, and we might fund it out of one-time money.
You didn't have to cut anybody's budget further than it's already been cut.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Paul. You're right. You're right. My only point is that, you know, there's got to be more than one ways to skin this cat, and you know, we're looking to cut $200,000 out of, you know, out of the general budget, and they're, you know, when we're asking them to cut some share out of it, out of the school budget, and then there's the common budget, which is debt services and employees' benefits.
Which is still mostly them.
But I don't think you're going to cut anything out of that.
No,
I mean,
that's obligation.
Right. So I'm just saying that if you look at, we've got 3 budgets: a general government budget, a school budget, and a, if you will, a common obligations budget. You know, and if you take $300,000 to distribute it between the general budget and the school budget, isn't necessarily an unfair thing to do. You know, and because you can't distribute any of it to the common obligations budget, because it doesn't have a revenue source, or you can't cut that pay. And if you take a look at it that way, you know, all of a sudden we're eating this elephant one bite at a time instead of the one big go.
Hopefully, we'll have answers on Wednesday, too.
Well, again, I was just about to say, we will have answers on Wednesday with Scantic Valley, and what was proposed and what is built into that budget is the worst-case scenario.
Yeah.
There have been some preliminary numbers that have come in, that those numbers are reduced, and I would assume that the board, because those preliminary numbers also did not have any Scantic Valley reserves built into them. I'm fairly confident that the Scantic Valley board will allot some type of reserve to reduce that, and I would suspect that we would be able to take, I'll give you a ballpark number of 150,000 off of that employee benefit section when we find out the numbers on Wednesday.
So the one thing I'll say to that is, in terms of getting ourselves on the same page going forward, the delta on the budgets, there is the 308 that we highlighted earlier, that, you know, the difference between the budget the superintendent presented and the budget that I presented. That budget is still 250,000 short on the policies. You told me that number.
Right, there's, I think, a 270 short on the
Yeah,
policy.
270,000 short on the policies, plus 12,000 short on a clay tennis court, plus 25,000 short on a health teacher, plus 35,000 on another police car that we need in addition to the one we have in there. I mean, this is the trouble.
Can you bring us all those numbers next time?
I think you have most of them.
Right, but put them on one piece of paper.
We actually have that list there.
Make an actual
Put it on one piece of paper.
Oh, look, we did our cuts list.
We just want to put those itemized for them.
Well, we'll modify that to present to you as well. So maybe that's the discussion for Wednesday, Richard, instead of having a department here, because like I said, I think that's, you know, if you just said we're not going to do our policies, it makes it a little easier.
Okay, the only thing I'd like to ensure is that we make full benefit of these meetings. That we put in a full meeting, so we have so much stuff to discuss.
Yeah. And Stephen, I guess, when we look at new initiatives, because if you have a cutback in your things, you look at what are all the new initiatives, and the only one we've talked about tonight would be, you know, funding the kindergarten. But are there other new initiatives that would be, that we should be aware
I
of
mean,
as a board, I guess.
we have
That would be the.
OPEB and capital, I mean, those are our new initiatives.
Well, he's
And-
not
and
bringing,
the
he's
2.25.
he's not bringing, he's not
No,
bringing
the
forth
only
new
one, the
initiatives.
only new initiative that and I don't know if, the only new initiative is the traffic sergeant. The only new thing that looks
yeah.
different in a department is a traffic sergeant. And I think with the amount of hours that we've spent talking about traffic and
But
crossing
that's not,
guards
that's
and
not
everything
true,
else.
though, because you purposely have held some capital off on equipment.
No, I'm just, right, I'm saying there's
New
there are
initiatives.
things,
It's
saying
just-
there are things that
yeah.
aren't in there that should be in there.
But I mean,
is
that was a
different
new
than saying-
initiative.
Yeah.
That
but
you
I'm
have
saying-
people now that have the not the education, have the experience to be able to do some asphalt repairs, and you were looking at trying to get some other equipment in to facilitate that.
I've seen a lot of commentary about potholes.
Right.
Well, we were looking at, 50,000 for what they call it a hot box. It's basically something that can, in the wintertime, we don't produce asphalt, the plants are closed, so you put cold patch in there and it gets all over the place and you have to keep refilling it. But we would be able to have this machine that heats asphalt, and you could actually permanently, you could actually patch with hot asphalt potholes off-season. That's not gonna end up, and honestly, the capital plan, I talked to Dr. Metz tonight, before this meeting about the capital plan, trying to finalize it. It's still a moving target. I
Yeah.
mean, the capital number is still a moving target. I can't even, if you said to me, give me your capital plan now, I don't know what number I'm funding to.
Yeah, well, he should have already made his presentation to us, too.
But he doesn't have a final thing many things aren't finalized for me because I'm still waiting for, I have the 1.5, but that's why if we can get that discussion nailed down on the second, we can move forward with a lot of other things.
Well, wait a minute,
So, well,
but,
so we're
well-
gonna have a list, can we have a list of new initiatives? Because, there's gonna be some of these things we're gonna vote on to change in the budget. There are new initiatives, and we should just all agree on what those are gonna be.
But I'm telling you, the only one thing that's new is the traffic
Just the
sergeant.
traffic.
Yeah, that's the only thing
It's
that's
a
new.
few $1,000s, and it's really a must do for.
3,800 or so.
but wait a
An
minute.
interesting point that Tom's bringing up, though, is there are new initiatives that you have stopped in order to bring us a balanced budget, correct?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a long list.
That's part of the cuts,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but stuff that supplemental budgets, a deputy fire chief, which I think is another thing that is desperately needed in that department, could create the opportunity to generate additional revenue through the EMS, through the ambulance, by doing transports, and could, I think, get to a point of being revenue neutral, but also be a tremendous enhancement to the department. But the upfront cost, the person has to get into the position and be paid for that year while they build up the EMS business. Couldn't afford it this year.
Yeah, so it's interesting to have the list of what you decided not to go forward in, because what we're really deciding as a town is we're deciding where our priorities are. And we need to know, okay, so we've decided not to do these 5 or 6 things, whether it's the asphalt machine or the deputy chief or something, and instead, as a town, we're deciding to go with all-day free kindergarten. And that's something I think that not only we as a board should know, but the town should know that these are initiatives we've held back. I know in our goal setting, we asked for you to put more money throughout the budget for innovation, to pilot projects that can try and fail, so that we can look at, saving revenue or enhancing revenue. And obviously, that's probably an initiative that's been put on the wayside in order to balance this budget. And it's not all schools. I would say the hit on health insurance is just killing us this year.
Yes.
And the other thing is, we really have no idea where it's going to go in the future, and that's worrisome.
I certainly next year, we'll probably put it in a 10% increase right into the budget assumptions.
Yeah.
If things remain as is. The other thing too, that in as much as the so-called projection was 808 for the school department, it also carried with it a $500,000 deficit that never gets mentioned.
Yeah.
So, it's been very generous at $800,000 and $8,000, and I don't think next year I'm gonna do it a little bit differently, and I'm gonna allocate that deficit, if there is one next year, so we focus on what a balanced budget is up front, as opposed to a projected number with a deficit that is in the background.
Richard, on the capital, I think you're right. My recollection from years past that we would have that presentation in February. And then as we're going through the budget, we're kind of
making those hard choices as between capital projects and maybe
Right.
even cutting something, or we've
Right.
come up with creative financing
Right.
and stuff like that. So I guess I'm a little puzzled that we have to make the decision on the total amount of capital sort of in the abstract, and then you come to us with the project.
I think I sent the report that I gave to the capital planning committee. I did present a $1.6 million capital improvement plan weeks ago.
Can you
Right,
resend
but
that?
I mean, but what they come to us with, like after they've
They
kind
have,
of
they
vetted
did
your
submit
thing.
their report. They did submit their report, but part of their report was looking for follow-up information on a couple of projects that they had said we should defer because we don't have the information. We did have the information, I just hadn't conveyed it to
Right.
them like I thought I had. So they gave me a report that said we should, like the sprinklers in the Blueberry and Wolf Swamp schools are, that's a big deal because the pipes freeze and the sprinklers. They had wanted more information on it. I had the information, I thought I'd related to them, I hadn't. So so we're still kind of going back and forth. But I made a presentation to them on a $1.6 million capital plan, and then and I just recommended to you a $1.5 million capital budget. And then they made their report on things, but we've been kind of dialoguing back and forth on their recommendations. So I don't want to put them in bad light. They've done their job.
No, I'm not
Part of
suggesting
it-
that.
Most of it's on me on follow-up.
I guess all I'm saying is I don't want to vote on the capital budget until we've kind of heard that presentation, you know?
Well, the capital budget is all part of the warrant, though. I mean, that I mean, it doesn't, you usually hear it somewhat earlier, but the capital budget gets voted on by the select board as part of the warrant process.
Well, what you're missing is, it used to be that the capital committee came before the select board and made their presentation,
Yeah.
period. And the town manager, then the select board had this, maybe a big list, and then they would play around with it and drop stuff and add stuff and give it back. But they made their presentation.
He's going to
based
call you
on-
to set that up.
Huh?
He's going to call you to set that up.
Yeah, on their highest priority needs. And they explained, I mean, if you went by the book, I mean, they're even supposed to get into how we're gonna pay for it, you know?
But where are we at? 1.4 and 1.5? What are they working on now?
They were still working with a
Six,
$1.6 million
That was the
number.
original.
But
Plus
what
your
is the
own
one you gave back to them? You just said 1.4?
No, I presented 1.63, which would have been 2.75% of general fund revenues per the policy.
Right.
On Friday, when we were trying to zero everything out, we ended up with a $1.51 million capital plan, so $100,000 and change is now off the table, or not say off the table, but has been removed from the capital line item in the budget I presented you, which means the capital plan I presented to them back, I think in January, is now, we have to take $100,000 out of that to get my capital plan recommendations to line up with my budget recommendations.
So we're gonna need, as Alex is right, we're gonna need that report.
We have, Richard and I received it last week or a week
It
ago.
just got in.
But again, part of it was follow-up, and I think they may meet again to kind of review it based on the information I gave them. And then they're gonna Dr. Metz is gonna line up a time to come here and talk to us about it.
Yeah, he's late, because this presentation should have already been made.
But then if
Can
we
you send
change
that
the
to us, Richard,
number,
if you
Sure,
want?
absolutely.
it'll be a changed report too, if we decide to change the number.
It's not, like I said, it's not.
But in general, and I think Dr. Metz has continued with this, is the capital planning committee has always prioritized their list. You know, I recall when Richard was chair, when I was chair before that, we just started, I said, here's where we ran out of money. You know, if you run out of money here, you run out of money here, you can, if they've done a good job of prioritizing the list.
Yeah.
And that's what we've asked them to do in general. So I don't think the shifting amount, I mean, changes their analysis. It certainly changes the results, but not their analysis.
It's a little different in that if you're carrying, say, $600,000 for asphalt and $200,000 for sidewalk, you don't have to necessarily drop off the sprinkler system work in exchange for 100% of funding a sidewalk. I think, and that's the way they look at it.
Right, but in fact, what they should be doing is segmenting the sidewalk and the asphalt and inserting it along the way. So it's not, here's 600,000 of streets, but it's, here's 200,000 streets, here's 200,000 streets, here's, or however they want to do that, so that it works its prioritization, I think. That,
I just don't want to convey that the capital planning committee has been deficient.
No,
In terms of the timeline, it's much more on me than on them, and it's only because we didn't have a final, everything's been a moving target.
I think it's changed how you're dealing with them. I think it's really the biggest thing, because before, the town manager didn't really interact that much. I mean, they gave the capital plan to the capital planning committee, and then the next person I actually reported to, and the Mark reported to, was a select board. There was very little
I think
communication.
when Stephen came here, he got more involved.
Right, yeah, more involved.
That's what the charter says, is the town manager
Right,
shall
and
present
before
a
Robin
capital
kinda let
plan
them
to
do
the
their own
capital
thing.
planning committee.
Right, well, yeah, but that's what Robin did. She
Yeah.
presented, but then she was
left- she
gone.
left it up
She
to
was
them.
gone. And we never checked back in. The only time we bring Robin in to talk with her, but after that, there was no communication, and we reported directly to the select board. And that was just a recommendation, Stephen. It wasn't cast in stone. And we didn't care if there was $500 million worth of projects. If we had $1 million, we prioritized $1 million, and that was the line. We drew a line in the sand.
So will we have that by Wednesday or
Yeah,
Friday?
worked well.
We'll have to talk to the meeting or the report?
The report.
Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
I can give you what he sent before, but again, what he sent had questions about the stuff that I've since answered.
I think we found a central problem.
Me?
Yeah.
I have fully confessed. I've flung myself upon the mercy of the board.
I was
say we
just
have a meeting
thinking
the
about
15th.
how we went through this conversation tonight, and we all got along so well. And I just started thinking, geez.
Well, Marie just said, we should schedule a meeting for the 15th.
Yeah.
That'd be my punishment.
Well, the more Stephen says aye, the more I say, yeah, that's the reason. All right, so it looks like we had all the meetings get set up. I'll get these set tomorrow with Debbie, and if we got any communication whatsoever, we need to get to Stephen between now and the 2nd, so that he can be prepared to bring stuff in. I guess we'll still talk about having a division chief here.
Like I said, I think my recommendation would be have a discussion about the policies.
How long will that take, though?
4 hours.
Wait a minute.
Oh, 5
But wouldn't
minutes.
that be talking about capital, though?
4 hours.
I mean, the policy.
The capital plan
And how much we're gonna put in.
and how much you're going to put into not the capital plan, capital funding number.
Right, but that's my point. How much we put into it depends on what you want to pay, how strongly you feel about the individual projects.
That's true. I mean,
Yeah, that's
it's
fine.
it's a lot easier to
Understood.
compromise stuff
All right,
that's.
that's fine. I'll
Deferrable.
Let me see
I'll
that.
the DPW here.
Yeah, that's right, there goes the
I'll the
truck.
DPW here. I mean, yeah, I mean,
But
Yeah, you can do capital and.
yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, I guess the reason why that wasn't registering me is I think we're just so far away from a balanced budget that, it's not gonna make a difference. We're still at machete time, not scalpel time.
Bring your machete.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so either.
I think it's close.
I think we'll get it all done
I
this
think
week.
it's in rounding error.
Rounding.
Rounding.
Rounding here.
Well, if it's up to me and we could go to the town meeting, I'd go to the town
I
meeting
don't know
where we are.
Yeah.
Pretty close to where we are, figuring that it's not gonna be there anyway. and
If
they'll
we
sort
round
out.
that 2.5% increase in property taxes to 2.8%, we round it like that,
I move
yeah,
we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you watching tonight. I hope there was some benefit that you have on the budget process and the woes that we're going to be going through for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Our next meeting will be on the 2nd. We look forward to seeing you at that time. It'll be in this room at the same time. Have a nice evening.
Did anybody second it?
I'll second.